million years ago, on the planet Earth, two brothers started watching Transformers media, and now they are going to make it your problem. Hi, I am Hayden.
And I'm Frankie.
And welcome to BroBots in Disguise, where we are going through and discussing every episode of every major Transformers cartoon.
And on today's episode, we are continuing with the Generation 1 cartoon and wrapping up Season 1 of both our cartoon... I'm sorry. I've already ruined our finale.
We're wrapping up Season 1. That's
We're wrapping up...
Just Season 1.
We're wrapping up seasons and rolling out tongues. I don't know, man. That's weird. But today's episode is our final episode of the first season of our podcast. And also the last couple episodes of the first season of the original Transformers cartoon.
Yeah.
We'll be covering episode 15, A Plague of Insecticons, and episode 16, Heavy Metal War, both released in 1984. These introduce episodes, the two subgroup Decepticons, Constructicon, Optimus, Climatic, Megatron duel. Oh my goodness, I am sorry about that, folks. But the Insecticons and the Constructicons are two Decepticon subgroups that are introduced right at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And it also sees the climatic duel between Optimus and Megatron.
There's a lot of duels between Optimus and Megatron.
But this kind of starts the trend of which, is to be expected of shows like this, but...
The final countdown.
There's like a final battle between Optimus and Megatron at the end of the season, you know?
Yeah.
And then it goes back to the status quo, or the show ends,
Either way. Or the show gets canceled.
Right.
We know that that's not much compared to our usual episode count, so afterwards we'll give a short analysis of Season 1 as a whole, and then we're going to examine the very entertaining Transformers public service announcements made around the time of the original cartoon. And then finally, we'll recap our experience with Season 1 of our podcast and discuss our plans moving forward. With that, let's get started.
At the time of this recording, these Transformer episodes are available on the Hasbro Pulse YouTube channel, as well as on DVD and several other streaming services.
Yes.
Yes. So... I'll discuss this when we get to the end of the episode, why things are a little out of orders on the YouTube channel. But our first episode today is A Plague of Insecticons, wherein the Insecticons emerge and begin to consume farmland, and why did I say it like that? Firmland.
Firmland.
The Firmland.
The firmest land you ever did see.
Alright, so the Insecticons emerge and begin to consume farmland, and the Autobots send a small team to investigate. But they get beat down by the new foes. Megatron befriends the Insecticons as the Autobot reinforcements arrive, while the Autobots fight the Insecticons and the Decepticons drain an oil refinery. Then everyone ends up fighting at the refinery, and the Insecticons cut out with as much energon as they can, chased by the Decepticons.
Yeah. So, there's some fun... honestly, there's a lot introduced in this episode with, the concept of, one, naturally occurring beast formers. 2, Transformers that woke up before the Decepticons and the Autobots. 3, Transformers being, playing into local myths and legends?
Kind of. Yeah, that's something that I found interesting, because the narrator... hang on just a second. I want to correct this from episode 1 while we're talking about the narrator. Victor Caroli is the narrator. I think I messed...
What a name. Victor.
What a voice, too.
Mm-hmm.
He narrates much of Generation 1 cartoon, and probably a lot of the commercials as well.
Yeah, I don't remember if he has as big of a presence in later seasons, because I know Season 1 has a lot of narration, but we'll just have to get to it.
He shows up in some of the recaps.
Okay, yeah.
at the beginning of second part of 2-part episodes and stuff
Right.
like that. But anyway, I just
In the
wanted to make
next
sure that
episode.
everybody knew the correct name, since I think I messed it up in our first episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, on to the main portion of this discussion. The narrator tells us that we are in Bali, a place called Demon Swamp.
Demon Swamp.
Yeah,
And everyone calls it that.
Right. And this is where the Insecticons have been living. The episode never really touches on when the Insecticons woke up, whether it was a long time ago when they first crashed on Earth, or if it was just recently.
Yeah.
But my theory and the impression that I get is that because the Insecticons have been living in this swamp and the surrounding area, that's how it got its name, Demon Swamp.
Right.
It was the Insecticons are the demons.
Exactly. And there's a lot there as far as like Transformers biology. Up until this point, we haven't seen any beast formers outside of the Dinobots.
Well, there's also like Ravage and Laserbeak,
Right.
and that's about it.
And that's the interesting thing is that they're Decepticons, which it's very iffy on what exactly a Decepticon gets categorized as, because you have Rumble and Frenzy who are, just basically like small Transformers.
Right.
But then you have Ravage and Laserbeak who are functionally animals,
Right.
and they're treated as such,
Yeah.
like pets. But-
Now, later on, we'll be introduced to, number one, other cassette Transformers that are animals. But we will also meet characters like Skylynx, who their primary robot mode is an animal.
right, which is fascinating.
Right. And I suppose we'll discuss more on that sort of biology later.
The main point I kind of wanted to make with it is that it's really cool to see that, given like they were just in the swamp,
Yes.
and like the surrounding farmland, they might have been able to see like tractors and stuff, but depending on when they woke up, I always got the impression that it was like way earlier, like a couple hundred years. Given the absence of like cars and jets and stuff that was relatively around a Transformer size,
Yes.
they're able to scan something that is smaller and then just adapt their vehicle mode into that.
Right.
Because they're just really, really big bugs.
Yeah. And we see this, of course, in Beast Wars, which that's set technically 300 years after Generation 1 chronologically,
Yeah.
but then they time warp and
Time travel shenanigans.
Yeah. But anyway, so they have future tech that allows them to turn into animals with skin and fur and
Right.
scales and stuff. But I think if we go to the Marvel comics, if I recall, Teletran scanned what it thought was the dominant species to have them
Yeah.
transform into. Because later on, of course, we see with the Pretenders where they can create organic shells, which sometimes is new technology and sometimes it's old technology, depending on what source you're coming from.
Right.
But it implies that the Transformers have the ability to turn into whatever a planet's primary life form is.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Teletran 1 thought it was cars and trucks and jets and stuff
Right.
because it never activated until the present day. In the origin for the Dinobots in the Marvel comics, or I may be getting this mixed up with the IDW comics, they arrived way sooner. They either arrived before the Ark. I think in the Marvel comics, the Dinobots arrive with the Ark.
Yes.
And they are sent out as dinosaurs because the dinosaurs are the main...
right. They're like a fail-safe
They're
sort of thing.
the dinosaurs are the main life form on the planet at
Right.
the time because Shockwave arrived on Earth in prehistoric times, so the Dinobots went out to fight him, and that's in the Marvel comics. And something similar happens in the IDW comics.
Right.
So if you take that and apply it to these Insecticons who showed up before the Nemesis and the Ark crashed on Earth. At first, I thought that they meant that they were an escape pod that
From the Nemesis.
But later on, when Shrapnel meets Megatron, he says, "I don't know you, yet I feel a kinship." And then Megatron says, "Decepticon Science generated you as it generated us." So either
What a
Shrapnel...
loaded statement.
Yeah, so either... Right, because that also kind of ties into that later scene in Five Phases of Darkness where you see the Constructicons building Megatron, you know? But... oh, yeah. We're going to get into the whole mishmash
Creation.
of that later in the next episode. But here... Either Shrapnel has amnesia from the escape pod crashing, or the escape pod didn't come from the Nemesis and just happened to also land on Earth.
That's a theory that I had, is that...
like in the Bumblebee movie, where we see the Autobots get into their own escape pods and launch from Cybertron on their own.
There's a concept in the next episode of Transformer Exile, which gave me the thought that maybe they had been either exiled, or it's just something that a lot of Transformers did during the war, was just migrate away from Cybertron, which would explain in later seasons why they just kind of have a galactic presence and everyone's like, oh yeah, you're here.
Right. And other people show up and stuff. And as we learn in the Headmasters cartoon, like the... Not the Rebirth 3-parter, so it doesn't really have bearing on this technically, but...
Yeah, it's slightly different.
But if we draw from various sources for lore to explain these things... we're
making informed decisions rather than logical decisions. Suggestions. Estimations.
Right. But like the Fortress Maximus crew... they left Cybertron on their own to get away from the war. And I feel like we do see that even within the Generation 1 cartoon.
Yeah.
But
it's not a concept that gets a lot of spotlight, but it is one that feels like it's there.
Yeah. But all that to say that the Insecticons may have landed at a time when giant insects were the dominant life form.
Oh, yeah, like
pre-dinosaurs
and stuff. Yeah. It's just big old bugs.
Although they do turn into modern day insects.
Right.
I mean, tangentially, they are essentially bricks with what we assume are legs and then things that stick out of them, and they call them
general outline of a
if
bug.
you squint, they actually look like bugs.
Kickback, I think, is the worst offender, because most of his transformation is like a few things turn around, and he just kind of does a 180.
Now, here's the thing, though. That actually looks like a grasshopper.
It does.
Yeah. The other two are bricks with things pointing out of them.
But we should probably introduce the Insecticons themselves. There's Shrapnel, Kickback, and Bombshell.
Yes.
And I love the vibe that they have as kind of like this crazy hillbilly, like country pumpkin family that's just causing a ruckus in the woods.
Right.
And they seem to be having a good time as well, where the little group of humans that come in and they're like, there's something in the water, and they get attacked.
Yeah.
The bugs are just kind of they're just kind of like, oh hey, your meal's getting away, and it's like, oh yeah, I better hop to it.
Right.
They just seem like they're like a bickering hillbilly family.
Yeah.
That is kind of having fun with spreading misery to the surrounding area.
Not that all hillbillies do that, but...
Yeah. But leading into the... they're a little bit, like, regressed, is the fact that they absorb energy by just consuming the raw material itself.
Yeah, which I find very interesting, that they can just eat food and digest it, almost like
they're
humans.
basically like humans,
Yeah. Which, honestly, in my mind, seems a little more progressive than... Because if you have to take energy from a thing, convert it into energon, and then absorb it through various means, versus just being able to eat that energy itself and convert it within yourself, that seems pretty useful.
I see it like the difference between, like, we have to, as humans, to safely eat something, cook it and eat it.
Right.
But it's like the raw thing, we process it, we cook it, we eat it.
Yeah.
The Insecticons are essentially like wild animals where they can just eat red meat, and their metabolism is adapted to where it doesn't affect them nearly as badly as it would us.
You're right.
So, and also there's like, you know, the concept of putting it in an energon cube. I feel like it allows the Transformers to do much more mass storage.
Yeah.
Like they can put it all into this cube, and then that cube has way more energy in it than what like raw food normally would.
I see your point. So it would be like taking an energon cube would be like a pill that just gives you everything you need all at once, whereas the Insecticons, this is probably why, and later on we see this, the Insecticons are always hungry and always eating, is because it's a much less efficient energy system.
Right.
That's probably why maybe all the Transformers at the time that the Insecticons left Cybertron could do something like that, but they have specifically modified themselves to the energon process, so that they're more fuel efficient. Which would make sense because the war's been going on so long and draining all of their natural resources on Cybertron for so long that they would have to become more efficient.
Yeah, they're all operating on a scarcity mindset.
Right. It's the same thing that creates the Micromasters later on.
If you think about it, grain, you know, it takes a lot of grain to make a lot of like flour and bread.
Yeah, you're right.
Which bread doesn't give even humans quite a bit. It gives them sustenance, but not enough to like full diet or anything.
Yeah.
So the Insecticons are eating predominantly grain.
Yeah.
Which isn't very efficient.
Right. So it makes sense. It's you've talked me into it that they are more primitive.
But also the fact that they're so isolated from everything.
Yeah.
This one boat mentions the farm.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, there's more food.
Yeah.
They just haven't left this area.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering too. But they know what a farm is. Mm-hmm. So I think that they venture out once in a while to terrorize farms. But he's probably realized
it's a locust swarm. They go out, eat everything, and then they're like, well, that's it. And then they come back.
Right. So they haven't been out in a while, and they're like, oh, farms are back.
Yeah.
Good.
They build the farms back.
The buffet is open again.
Yeah.
But yeah, also one little side snippet. I like their voices. Sometimes they can be a little annoying when you've heard them for too long, but I do like them.
They're kind of repeating,
weird,
like...
They repeat things, and they have that weird, like...
It's like a
noise. Right. Let me see if I remember what that's called. It's like a...
It's a wah-wah kind of effect.
Yeah, kind of a wah-wah, reverb,
Yeah, it constantly sounds like there's something kind of grinding together, but not like a or anything. It's like a very smooth.
It's to give them a more insect-like sound.
There's a buzzing vocoder on them, which is really cool. I do like what you pointed out about the kinship and the Decepticon science and everything, is that there's this weird kind of like genetic recognition between them as like, we are Decepticons.
Right. And it's not just they both have Decepticon logos on them.
Right. Pretty easy to figure.
Right. Sludge puts it much more simply. They're probably on our team because they have this little logo on us.
Ones with face like this, I think.
Yeah. But and Thundercracker drops a little bit of lore that he calls it the idento-computers are what have adapted to them to life on Earth, which also might suggest that that's what gave them the ability to consume raw materials and convert it themselves.
That could be.
Though he might just be referring to the idento-computer is what identifies the life form that they need to transform into.
Teletran was the one that identified everything for them.
Right.
And we don't know if the Insecticons had a Teletran-like computer with them.
Right.
Or if there is... That's like some sort of
built-in
like organ for them,
right? Because in later series and even in G1, I feel like there's scenes where Sometimes Transformers have to be built to turn into things, and sometimes they can just scan things and then turn into that.
Yeah.
You know?
Nowadays, it's usually like you just scan something.
Right.
But then there's also like, well, how many times can you scan something? Did you scan something on the fly and then just like change into a jet immediately to make a quick getaway? It's dense, but
Yeah.
But the Insecticons head out towards the farm, and
Right.
we get the undefeatable Skyfire, Brawn, and Windcharger trio
Yes.
to intercept them.
Yes, I love how that's like kind of a strike team.
Yeah.
Like that should be sold as a set, is Skyfire, Brawn, and Windcharger.
I would buy it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, like the a while back they came out with a new Jetfire mold, and I know that they've been coming out with new Windchargers and Brawns, but they should make a Brawn and Windcharger to scale with a Jetfire,
Like a box
and
set.
like make it a function where you can like shoot out, you know. yeah, like you could load them in like little Hot Wheels into like his, when he's in jet mode, into the area underneath him, or they can fit into his cab or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I just think that would be really fun.
I would love that.
But I do like the idea that they are sort of a strike team and work together a lot.
Right.
And sadly, I believe this is the last episode that Skyfire is in.
Really unfortunate, considering the fact that he's really overpowered and extremely useful.
Right.
Functions super well with the team.
Yeah. And kind of works as a good like storytelling method to get them to places. Like the other Autobots drive to Bali.
Yeah.
What? from Oregon or wherever in the United States they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then but Skyfire could just fly them there, right? You know, that makes more sense. Even though it still would take hours for him to get there.
Yeah. It's like, by the time they got there, the Decepticons probably would have just eaten the entire, like, eastern seaboard. But I do like that you pointed out Shrapnel in this episode is easily, one, the leader. He generally is. But two, ridiculously overpowered.
Yeah, because you've got, like, Kickback, he's got super strong kicks, which also, ouch, he shorts out a transform circuit. What Skyfire says, a transform circuit.
He kicks Skyfire hard enough to where his internal organs have been ruptured.
Basically. And it's kind of an interesting little bit of continuity here. His cabin, which is part of his chest, kind of flips up and down when he's trying to transform.
Oh, yeah.
And then later, Wheeljack opens up the cabin to fix the transform circuit. So maybe that's where those are.
Same location.
You know, yeah. But anyway, so Kickback has super strong kicks. Bombshell, like you pointed out, has the cerebral shells that are not in this episode, but that kind of becomes his thing.
Yeah, he's got the big head cannon, and in this one, it just kind of is like a flamethrower, but not really.
Yeah.
It's more just a gun on his head.
Yeah, and then Shrapnel, he's got shrapnel grenades.
Which, magic hand sliding tech.
Right,
Very nice.
We'll get to that later. Clone beams. He can just create clones out of scrap metal.
Yeah. Not even scrap metal, it's just...
Yeah.
They're the clones.
And override waves, which can mind control Autobots.
And it's like kind of implied that they're one and the same as well.
Actually, more of body control, because like when he controls Sideswipe and Sunstreaker, they're still talking to the Autobots.
He just takes over their nervous system. Essentially.
Right. He takes the wheel.
Yeah.
But
and then later,
but that's also like kind of probably how he controls the clones also, because that's when
that makes sense.
Because in both cases, Trailbreaker blocks his signal with force fields, which is funny, but also good continuity. And that's what cuts off his control of both Sunstreaker and Sideswipe and the clones later on.
There's an interesting thing. The Insecticons later on kind of develop into more of just like a mindless swarm than anything else.
Yeah, the clones kind of have their own sort of thing going on.
Interesting that they say the control beams and the cloning, like, he uses the control beams to control the clones.
Right.
It's possible that he, like, later on, they never address it, but that they just started making so many clones that Shrapnel could not control them.
Well, here, I'm going to get to a little thing about, once I mention one more thing, I'm going to get to a theory about that also.
Okay.
later on in the episode, Shrapnel also has lightning powers where he can channel and redirect the lightning in a
pretty cool
thunderstorm, which is really cool, and I don't think we see it again.
I think we see it like a handful of times.
Yeah, we see similar things that he can do.
His character design works perfectly for that.
Because he's got the two pincher things.
He's a pincher bug. And those kind of like are big like shoulder horns coming off of him.
Right.
And they look like, lightning rod sort of thing. So him being like the radio wave, control wave, lightning guy is very fitting for his character design.
Right.
And Bombshell has a gun on his head.
Yeah. But see,
and Kickback's got
in
cool goggles.
in season 2, Bombshell starts using the Cerebro shells.
Bombshell really takes a step forward later on.
He's really kind of he's like a mad scientist, he's mind controller, and he kind of takes center stage, even though Shrapnel's still implied to kind of be the leader. Yeah. Bombshell takes center stage with the Insecticons in season 2.
Right.
And my theory for that is because Trailbreaker keeps cutting off Shrapnel's control waves in this episode, that's why they switch to Bombshell's cerebral shells.
Because those are physically burrow.
Yeah, you have to actually dig those out to make them stop working. You can't just use a force field to cut them off.
And Kickback still kicks things.
Yeah. But that could also be something that Bombshell's cerebral shells allowed the Insecticon clones to kind of be their own insects. They're not like fully sentient, but they are. They
operate on like animalistic instinct.
Right. In season 2. But that's why I think that Shrapnel gets kind of nerfed in season 2 and Bombshell steps up.
See that.
Speaking of their considerable power, inspiring legends of the Demon Swamp, when the Autobot reinforcements are driving to Bali, they run into a town celebration. Village celebration.
In a canyon.
Which I think is kind of odd, but I don't know. I don't know enough about Bali to say whether or not this is culturally insensitive or if it's a good representation of something that happens there, or within the logic of the cartoon, could that possibly be like some sort of religious warding ceremony to ward off the Insecticons?
Yeah.
Because if they think of the Insecticons as demons, they might be doing this celebration to kind of say, stay away from our crops, we respect you, keep away. You know? Anyway, that was just an interesting thought that I had that's not brought up in the episode, but it could be something. It could explain why they're in the canyon.
It's a cool theory, but honestly, I think it's more of just like, there's an obstacle.
Right. So that Sideswipe decides to dig a tunnel. Yeah. Instead of going over the cliff, it decides to dig a tunnel.
It's like, we'll just go through.
Yeah.
Sideswipe also has like a weird assortment of gadgets and stuff.
Throughout
sometimes
the whole
he has
season,
drills, sometimes he has like a hammer, sometimes he's got a rocket pack that Optimus demands from him.
Yep. And him and Unstreaker make a
I always love whenever they
team up.
They tag team some people. They like drive in, ramp up, and transform, and then drop kick them. But there's something really cool about the shot where they're fighting. Like they jump in and they're kind of like tackle Megatron, and he just like rips them off of him like WrestleMania style. And it's just really cool to see him just fending off Autobots like they're significantly weaker than he is.
Right. It kind of speaks to his main power.
Yeah. There's a couple shots of Megatron in this episode that are like they look unreasonably cool.
Yeah.
There's this one and another.
I love the one where he's leaning up against the oil drum with the gun.
I was like, dude, he just needs an Energon cigarette. He'd be so cool.
Wheeljack can just fly in this episode, which is something the Autobots have not been able to do since like More Than Meets the Eye.
He's got I got wing-like fin appendages on my back. Like, I can probably do this.
Right. It's like, where was that ability when you needed to fly in a previous episode?
Yeah.
But speaking of things that return, and I'm so glad that you mentioned this, the energy mattresses return.
Yeah.
because I kind of zoned out on that, but I think this is possibly one of the last episodes that the mattresses
they
show
squeeze
up in
it down,
also.
and it's just a nice little concise pile of energy mattresses. And
Right.
I always loved
turn
the detail
rainbow.
that they're normally purple,
Yeah.
and then they squeeze down and they become like kind of rainbow
Right.
sort of color. But
This whole spectrum of
um,
stuff.
I don't know
Yeah.
if they make a return or not, but if not, R.I.P.
Yeah.
We love them.
Something that does show up and return a lot in Transformers, surprisingly, is rubber tires are the answer to everything. In this one, they're just like, get on top of a car, and because of the rubber tires, you'll be safe from lightning.
Yeah.
It's such an
it's like
80s
not-
cartoon thing to do.
Not even be like, hey, you guys got rubber tires on your robot mode.
Right,
that
right.
just sit there.
Yeah.
So you're obviously, what about the jets who
Now-
also have like rubber tire landing gear?
Now, here's the thing. Because lightning is electricity needs to be grounded in order to zap you.
Yes.
The rubber is supposed to... The theory going on here is that the rubber is supposed to be enough of insulation between you and the ground that you're not grounded.
Yes.
And therefore can't
And
be zapped.
there are cars that are designed to where like...
Yeah, to have grounds.
Right, it's
yeah.
grounded, and it's so
Or
that
to-
when it gets struck by lightning, the interior doesn't get zapped.
Right. It's
It all
the
channels through the
exterior.
chassis.
Right.
That being said, the Autobots are all chassis.
Right.
They would be getting zapped.
Right.
It is a fun visual seeing Optimus riding on top of
He looks
Brawn.
so awkward,
Yeah,
just
just like-
leaning off to one side because Braun's so much smaller than the other.
Yeah.
Is it Ironhide is the other one?
I think Ironhide's the other one.
Speaking of Optimus, the Muscle Man.
Oh my goodness, he's a tank in this one.
He just yeets an oil tanker at Megatron. It's so funny.
He is strong. But like first he takes the whole oil tanker and like rotates it so that it gets put out because there's like huge fire and stuff on the water. I did like the little scuffle where Thundercracker lights the water and they get underneath the dock.
Oh yeah,
and
they
then,
go under it. That's pretty
like,
cool.
Shove
I like
him
that.
in and stuff.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah.
But I will say one thing about the rubber tires is that it is kind of slightly thematic because the Autobots picked the cars. They chose all of the vehicles that humans use because it's human culture.
Yeah.
And it's like a little element of like, human culture can actually help us in the fight. and
Right,
stuff.
the humans
because the
are
Decepticons are all military vehicles and
Right.
a bunch of different things that, are more of like for the utilitarian side
Right.
of it.
And a cassette player.
And a cassette player. The most deadly utilitarian vehicle mode you could possibly have. But it's like, I kind of see something there. It wasn't intended, but I can see something.
Yeah, that's really cool that you picked up on that because it's like by helping the humans help them back
And
indirectly.
There's a line
That's
where
indirect.
they kind of applaud Spike for it's like, oh, you're a true Autobot sort of thing.
Yeah, because he is the one that
suggests
kind of
it.
comes up with it. Yeah.
right.
So that's pretty cool. I didn't
And
pick up on
then
that.
the Insecticons, there is a really fun dynamic shift where they've kind of they've allied with Megatron, and
Yeah.
he's like, oh, they're kind of like pets.
Yeah.
I can just like keep them appeased with Energon,
Right.
and they'll do anything I want.
Right.
There's a lot of fun to be had with the fact that they just at the moment's notice are like, all right, the Decepticons are getting trashed.
Yeah.
They're no good. They did just give us a nice little energy mattress of Energon. They just like chow down on it and then book it out.
Yep.
And the fact that they're like,
I like how that sets up kind of a third faction that
Yeah.
they're not. Because like Optimus, being skeptical as he usually is, he's like, oh, they'll
be back.
They'll be back, and so will the Decepticons, and they'll probably team up again in the future, which they do because
Yeah.
they got the Decepticon logo on them. That's how we're selling them as Decepticons.
but I'm such a fan of rogue Transformers factions.
Yeah.
Even if they're only like a handful of groups strong,
Right.
like maybe 10 or less.
Yeah.
And stuff. The fact that they're surprisingly powerful
Yeah.
rogue pests for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And they're just like, screw this, we're going off and doing our own thing. And it's a fun dynamic shift. And
Yep.
the fact that they consistently keep up with that is cool. I like that.
And then Wheeljack makes a comment about turning Spike into a motorcycle. Which is so funny and terrifying.
I love to think that his brain is towards, like, we will surgically turn you into a motorcycle.
Yeah, but it's funny because it foreshadows, like, the first episode of season 2, Autobot Spike, where he becomes, spoiler alert, he becomes his brain gets put in a robot. And then also in the movie, where Spike has created a exosuit that can transform.
It's a spaceman.
Spoiler alert, but, you know.
And it's like a weird plot point in there of, like, you gotta learn how to transform. And it's like, shouldn't you just have a button that lets you do that?
Right. But but it's kind of interesting that that's a little foreshadowing that it may or may not, because the movie was in development at this time, basically. Yeah. Or around this time, the movie was starting development, right?
The idea probably floated around.
So they probably hadn't. So it's possible. It's not likely, but it is possible.
Yeah.
That somebody knew that Spike was going to have an exosuit when he grew up. Right. So that's a clever little foreshadowing. More likely it's a coincidence, but it's kind of neat that it's there. And also we get a interesting fact that Spike is not old enough to drive. He's assuming, I don't know what his native state is, and I don't know what that state, their laws of how old you have to be to get a driver's license.
But this begs the question, how did he get a job on an oil tanker?
I was about to say, so he's at least, like, younger than 16, right? Yeah. Because generally that's when licenses are able to be issued.
Right.
But he has a job in an oil tanker.
Yeah. I'd be willing to say that, like, Sparkplug
bring your son
there.
Yeah, or bring your son to work day or something.
Or Sparkplug owns it.
Yeah.
And that's how they're able to afford to just go and do stuff with the Transformers all the time.
I mean, we never see Spike's mom. It's possible that either she passed away or they're divorced. Yeah. And it was Sparkplug's turn with the kid that weekend.
That was just, we've gotten involved with an alien war, so you're not going back. Sorry.
Right. And also, something else interesting about this episode, I think it's the last episode for Skyfire, unless he shows up in one or two of the early season 2 episodes, but I don't think he does.
It's weird that he just dips.
Yeah, and that's for legal reasons because of Harmony Gold and Bandai and Macross and Robotech and Jetfire.
He was a crossover toy.
Yeah, he was kind of a crossover toy with the main... It's complicated. You can read further into it, but basically there was legal
lore.
His toy was based on another toy that in the United States was sold as another toy, and that company got Hasbro with legal issues to where Skyfire couldn't appear basically in the show anymore.
But Jetfire can.
Yeah. He's sold as Jetfire, but that's why he's called Skyfire in the cartoon, because they couldn't advertise Jetfire on TV. Anyway, that's a long story. It's also the last episode with it's possibly the last episode with the energy mattresses. Yeah. And also Starscream is not in this episode, which might be because he got beat to pulp in the previous episode after Megatron took him. Or, weird little bit of continuity I'll get into in the next episode, he was busy during this episode. So he's either busy recovering or busy building. Yeah. But either way, he's not in this episode, and I believe it's the only season 1 episode he's not in.
Interesting. All in all, I like this episode a lot more than I remember.
I always enjoyed it.
It's just a fun one. Yeah.
And with that, we'll take a short break before we come back to our next episode, Heavy Metal War.
Yes.
We now return to BroBots in Disguise.
Oh, yeah.
So, Heavy Metal War is our next episode. You want to read this description?
Yeah. Megatron challenges Optimus to a fair duel to end the war, but then uses the Constructicons' invention to take the powers of all of the Decepticons to get the edge. The Constructicons are sent to wreck Teletran 1 while the duel takes place so it can't detect the deception. Megatron whoops Optimus with the new powers, and the Autobots prepare for exile. But the Dinobots defend Teletran from assassination. And when the Autobots discover the deception, they rejoin the fight and blast the Decepticons into a fiery demise. ... Or question mark.
Yep. So
where do we start with this one?
Yeah, well, apparently you want to start, according to your notes, you want to start with the energy revolution.
So, the construction crew at the beginning of this episode just casually mentioned that with the power generated by the energy disk that they're building, they'll be on the route to creating clean, free energy for everyone.
Yeah, by harvesting the magnetic fields.
Whoa.
Wow.
This is impressive.
Then. I see this as part of the Autobots' influence on sharing their technology with the humans.
That's fair.
Now, that's not to discount humans and the things that they can do, because
We walked on the moon!
This is a typical thing that happens in Transformers, as humans invent these bizarre, crazy, over-the-top things. Like, we get this all the time in Season 2 especially, but also even starting here in Season 1.
And then there's also the common theme of, like say, Mech in Transformers Prime, of, like, merging human and Transformers technology to make something else.
So it could just be pure human invention. It could also be inspiration from the Autobots.
Yeah.
But there are no Autobots at this construction site.
Yeah.
And the Constructicons, they show up, they steal the energy discs and the power converter, and also the way they're assembling this just makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's just random parts on random buildings and stuff. It's not really, like, set up to be a power facility,
right.
The way that they're putting it together looks, But
you mentioned it's in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, it's also just way out in the middle of nowhere. You see a city way off in the desert. This kind of gets back to that desolate feel that I was talking about way back in episode 1, where the Earth feels desolate.
Even as a kid, I thought that about this episode specifically.
Right, because everything takes place in, like, canyons and stuff, and deserts, and I can't believe I forgot to mention this before the break in Plague of Insecticons, that it's possible that the Insecticon swarm wiped out much of humanity and they're only just now reviving. That was my theory back in episode 1, remember?
Yeah.
Why the Earth feels so desolate in season 1 is because this is actually a post-apocalyptic 1984.
The Insecticons.
Where the Insecticons periodically plague the entire Earth.
Yeah. They build up clones and then they just get out of hand, and then they all go through and then just die off, and then it's back to just the original 3.
Right, and then that's why they start eating each other. Yeah. But anyway, maybe that's why the Earth is so desolate. But anyway, you
never know.
Yeah. And then this construction site way out here in the middle of nowhere, when the Constructicons fly back to their base, they fly back past what looks like the Autobot volcano. We can't see the arc from here, but the landscape is very similar. The volcano with the pine woods around it and the river flowing past it. It looks very similar.
Yeah.
And we might just not be able to see the arc from this angle.
Who knows?
So that to me implies that this base or this construction site might be close to the Autobots, and it's possible that it's the Autobots' influence that has created this energy disc. Something Wheeljack cooked up that actually might have worked.
But if this is on the verge of giving free, clean energy to everyone in the world,
why are the Autobots not guarding it? And why do the Autobots not investigate it when it happens?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny how at first, because that's when they realize that they're with the Decepticons, is when they transform and say, we return to Megatron.
So they just could have assumed
They could have just assumed that it's just green construction vehicles.
Who are these guys?
Who are these guys? Yeah.
But this is one of the
very funny scene.
It's a very rare instance of there actually being a robots in disguise moment. In the show, because he just thinks they're another construction crew, and is like berating them, and then he's like, "There's nobody driving," like that,
right?
Though it does happen,
Right.
Very rarely, but it does
Right.
happen.
And then they just completely break their cover. And you'd think that they'd want this to be undercover because this is going to be part of Megatron's plan. So this whole opening scene mostly just serves to introduce the Constructicons and really has no bearing on the rest of the episode.
Where it's like, look at this one. He's a crane. Look at this one. He's got a big bed.
Yeah. That robot's got a big bed.
Oh, no. I will say, there's, like, kind of a cloak and dagger element to the Constructicons, where the knowledge of them existing feels like it's very, like, under wraps.
Yeah.
And the less that the Autobots or anybody knows about them existing, the better.
Because the Autobots don't really know they even exist until, like, the battle at the end.
Of the episode.
That's a good point. The Autobots, not counting the Dinobots, the Autobots at large see Devastator before they see the Constructicons.
Exactly.
So they probably, that's why they're so confused. He's just a big guy. They don't know that he's a combiner.
There's, and, like, you kind of see that with Megatron, building this whole facility.
Right.
And that he just casually drops, they were worth the time that we took to build them.
Yeah.
And just... Well, the time element makes me think that it was probably, like, pre-Ultimate Doom. He started, like, building them.
Yeah, because this is a different base. This is not their underwater base that they're usually at. This is
a landlocked desert base.
Which also might be somewhere near the Autobot base.
Right.
Which is why they fly past it.
They could
the
just
other
be like,
fountain in the background.
Right. They could just be, like, silently stealing supplies from Autobot supported ventures and stuff to build this base and the Constructicons.
Right.
But the time element is really interesting because the Dinobots were built as a scientific experiment.
Yeah.
And were specifically of, like, historical value. We'll make them as dumb as possible.
Yeah. It's historically accurate. It's not helpful.
It's historically accurate WMDs.
Right. It's like the whole argument about, like, Viking television. It's like, do you have do you cater to the people who think Vikings were basically the bikers of the medieval world, or do you cater to the historical accuracy where they were just adventurers that came from Scandinavian societies? It's like where do you fall in that?
Yeah, where Wheeljack was like, well, let's go with the historically accurate side, and Optimus was like, could you strap a nuke onto them?
No. I think that Optimus is more like, why didn't you make them smart? Which,
but for Megatron, number one, in later seasons, we'll see that Scrapper, especially, is like one of the smartest Decepticons.
Yeah,
he's coordinated. He's all of the Constructicons, honestly, are like experts in their own field. The Mixmaster, he's like an alchemist, essentially.
Yeah.
And Scrapper's like a strategic architectural engineering, like, genius.
Yeah.
So, I think probably around when the Decepticons first encountered the Dinobots, Megatron started building these guys.
Ooh. That's
and
interesting.
Just as, like, kind of a quiet project.
Like, if they can build it, so can we.
Yeah. And he was like, we need this tactical advantage.
It's an arms race.
And then the energy crisis started getting worse, and he was like, all right, no holds barred, bring Cybertron into Earth's orbit.
Right. Like, he had planned to release Devastator before the Ultimate Doom.
Yeah.
But the Constructicons weren't constructed in time for Ultimate Doom.
And
that's an interesting theory. I've never thought of that.
Possibly. They're also, like, really, really efficient and effective.
Yeah.
So this kind of feels like they're the secret weapon.
Yeah.
And considering the fact that this entire episode, only that construction crew knows that they're part of the Decepticons.
Right.
Up until the very end.
Right. Now, something very famous or infamous about this episode is the line that you were just talking about. In their secondary base, Megatron, of course, says that we built them in this base.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody points out that this is a huge or this is contradicted later in season 2, the episode "The Secret of Omega Supreme," where spoiler alerts. Omega Supreme knew the Constructicons on Cybertron and was friends with them, but then they joined. Well, they were mind controlled by Megatron. They get mind controlled a lot because there's an episode where the Autobots mind control Devastator. But anyway, and made them join the Decepticons. He reprogrammed them to be Decepticons, and they betrayed Omega Supreme.
Right.
So that means that they had to exist before, and in that same episode, it is the same Constructicons that are on Earth.
Exactly.
Now, right?
Same neon green purple color scheme.
Right. They even turned into their Earth mode somehow 4 million years ago. No. It was further than that. It was more than 4 million years. It was probably like 6.
It was the golden age, wasn't it?
Yeah, Cybertron was still golden in that episode, if I remember. But so funny how the golden age is just literally gold. But anyway, and that is shown in at least 3 episodes.
Yeah, it's a consistent thing.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. And then lesser spoken about, but also just as important, is the contradiction that in the 5 Faces of Darkness, the flashback to the birth of Megatron, which we briefly touched on in the previous episode, we see, and of course, season 3, especially those episodes animated by that company, ACOM, I believe they're called, are riddled with animation errors and characters showing up where they're not supposed to be and stuff. So you take it with a grain of salt, but it looks like a group of Constructicons are the ones that build Megatron.
Right.
So, however, there are more Constructicons in that scene than there are usually in the team, because there's 6 Constructicons.
Yeah.
Generally, but there are other characters who are considered Constructicons later, and this has been kind of retconned in other Transformers lore and stories and stuff, is that Constructicons is a general term for construction vehicle.
Like they're the worker class
right,
sort of thing.
But there's also the specific Constructicons.
The Constructicon team.
By the time of the War on Earth, these were like the main Constructicons.
Yeah.
They were either the last ones left, or they just kind of took the name and spoiled it for all the other construction robots that
this is
Transformers had.
A bit stringy of a theory, but timeline of the Constructicons.
Yes.
Megatron says that they were built. Yes. He doesn't say that they were created, they were built.
Yeah, that gets into that was the theory that I was about to get into. I was laying groundwork. I think you just picked up on where I was going with all this.
Right.
Yeah, that's all the groundwork. I wanted to bring up those contradictions to say that in the episode Starscream's Brigade, where he builds and we'll bring up Starscream's Brigade again later in this episode, but where he steals the personality components or something like that from a Decepticon vault of the Combaticons, and then puts them into Earth machines, and they transform into the Combaticons.
Right.
And they've been essentially reborn with new bodies.
Yeah.
This could be the same thing that happens with the Constructicons. Sometime after the Secret of Omega Supreme, they were dismantled, and their personality chips were saved.
Yeah.
And then between episodes at some point, possibly even while Cybertron was in orbit, the personality chips were shipped from Cybertron to Earth. And then Megatron installed the personality chips in these bodies that they had been constructing for the Constructicons on Earth. So when he says, we built them, he means they built the bodies.
Right.
The minds already pre-existed.
So you could still have...
They've been rebuilt on Earth.
You could still have
both.
the Omega Supreme backstory.
Yeah.
You could still even have that shot where the Constructicons build Megatron.
Right.
You can still have all of that.
And
them being built or reborn on Earth.
Decepticon Science.
Yeah.
And that also explains why they're so much smarter than the Dinobots.
Yes.
Because the Dinobots are constructed completely from scratch. Wheeljack built their, and Ratchet built their personality components. They were born completely on Earth, which also will come up later in the episode. But the Constructicons are brilliant scientists. So if their personality components already existed from Cybertron, that means that they were probably constructed by Vector Sigma, as we see in later episodes, and that's why they have a full and complete brain. Yeah. They just have new bodies.
Because even with the Combaticons, when they reawaken in their bodies, there's no like memory loss or anything like that. They just kind of are complaining that they're in crude bodies.
Yes.
So, and those guys are war criminals.
Yes.
The worst of the worst. The Constructicons were loyal engineers and architects and fascinating stuff.
Yeah. I thought these theories were very interesting. And also, it could also explain why the Autobots don't recognize them. It's because these are their new bodies. And why in The Secret to Omega Supreme they appear in their Earth forms is because Omega Supreme, if I remember correctly, is telling Optimus his backstory. So it's Optimus's imagination of the Constructicons.
It's like, I've never seen them before.
If he's only ever seen them in their Earth modes, he's just imagining them in their Earth modes on Cybertron.
It's all coming together.
We worked around one of the biggest plot holes in G1.
Plus, we'd have to get to that episode to... Because I don't remember if they turn into Devastator in the episode with the Secret of Omega Supreme.
I don't remember if they do in the flashback, but I'm sure they do in the fight.
If not, then we have an interesting situation with the new bodies that were built could be specifically designed to turn into Devastator.
Right.
And
because this is possibly the first time this has happened.
Yeah.
Because most every other Combiner team
is a season 2
is edition. A season 2. Yeah, they're created in season 2.
Right.
Except for
Defensor.
Defensor. We don't know where he came from.
Yeah. He's a free agent. Others were created. Others were like ramshackle built.
Yeah.
And then Defensor just spawns in.
Yeah. Even the season 3 Combiners don't.
Abominus. Computron is built.
The Predacons, I believe the Quintessons built them.
Yes.
We don't know where Abominus came from.
Abominus is another free agent.
Yeah.
Probably out fighting Defensor.
It's possible that Defensor and Abominus existed prior, but not likely.
Yeah.
And we'll discuss that more when we get to them.
Also, the concept of them not originally being a Combiner.
Yes.
This is all entirely dependent on if they turn into Devastator in Secret of Omega Supreme, because I cannot remember.
Right.
But this would explain why, as you point out, Scrapper is a foot.
Yes.
The leader of the Constructicons turns into the foot.
Yes, I've always found that so interesting because with the 5 people Combiners, it's always the chest that's the leader, right? With although Swindle takes center stage a lot of times, he steals the show. But with Devastator, Scrapper in the cartoon, Scrapper seems to be the leader.
Yeah.
And he turns into the foot.
And he's pretty consistently the leader. I think there's a handful of times where Mixmaster takes the front in different...
usually just if he's being useful that episode.
Exactly. But also Devastator's unique in that he's a 6-person Combiner.
Yeah.
Which you don't see that often.
Yeah. So, that is also true.
Right.
Most of the time.
Which again kind of lends itself to the fact that these are the first Combiners.
Yeah, they're an experiment.
So it's like, well, 6 is inefficient. We can do it better with 5, sort of thing.
Yeah. It has... Well, actually, we will see this later in this episode, because having 6 creates that joint linkage between the top half and the bottom half. That's where Optimus shoots. And that's and when he shoots Devastator there, he breaks apart immediately.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, of course, he's already sustained some Dinobot damage.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Devastator kind of
There's some dinosaur damage there, though. We'll talk about it later, but yeah. But
so that might be why having just one person be the torso is a stronger thing, so they don't all fall off.
One guy gets the brunt of it,
right?
Instead of there being a weak link,
right,
in the middle.
Right. Interesting stuff.
Yeah,
you had a lot to say about these two subgroups.
Combiners have always had like a lot of really cool concepts and lore going into them.
Right. Oh,
moving on.
Before we move on, one more point. Maybe Starscream wasn't in this the previous episode. He is definitely in this episode. But maybe he wasn't in the previous episode because he was at this secondary base creating the helping in the creation of, because he is the scientist.
Right.
So
that could also be like sort of a punishment, is just like, oh man, I gotta work behind the scenes. I don't get any glory. It basically gets put in a corner. Right. I do like that that he would help with the scientific approach of how do we build a combiner.
Right.
But
anyway.
Yeah.
Now we can move on to. There's a lot that happens in this episode.
There is so much.
A lot of lore is
just kind of dumped
in this episode because in addition to getting a new Decepticon team, introducing the Combiners, having a fight with the Dinobots, there is also Megatron challenging Optimus to a duel, which is apparently a...
we get Cybertronian law and the Code of Combat.
Yeah.
Very cool, Code of Honors type of thing, where he just kind of manipulates... He does the legal loophole thing. And... something I love about the scene where he approaches the base is that he doesn't have his arm cannon. Yeah. Very cool, one, he's dodging all the shots and everything. Yeah. But two, it shows that, he is trying to make the show of I do come in peace.
Yeah, I'm coming to talk. I didn't bring my gun, even though I turn into a gun.
Yeah,
and I have a gun on my shoulder.
On my back.
But I can't take that off.
Yeah.
But I can take off my arm cannon. Yeah, I really love the detail, how season 1 especially pays attention to when Megatron shouldn't have his gun on his arm.
Yes.
Because in the last episode when he's just chilling, he doesn't have his arm his arm cannon on his arm. And back in the first episode, the first story arc, he takes his gun off when he's assured that victory. Yeah. When they're flying away in the victory.
He's assured a victory in the victory.
Right. He doesn't have it there, and that's why Starscream threatens to kill him.
This is a tangent, but in the All Hail Megatron comics, there's a scene where they're patrolling a victorious battlefield on Earth. Yeah. And he takes his cannon off, and he takes an American flag and uses it to polish it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just great little details like that, with, how he interacts with his cannon.
I remember that, yeah.
Greatest scene, one of the best scenes of Wheeljack, I think, in the season is his shock blast cannon, where he pulls out this, bizarre looking bazooka contraption and it's let's see how he can handle the shock blast cannon, and it just immediately blows up in his face.
yeah
It's so that's funny. The most Wheeljack invention possible.
Right. I love that. And all the Autobots get a chance to shoot, or not all the Autobots, but a lot of Autobots get a chance
Cliff
to
Jumper
shoot.
with a weird freeze blast out of his hands.
I think it's the gas glass that he uses in Ultimate Doom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then Ironhide just shoots out of his fingers.
Yep.
But yeah, according to Cybertron law, one of the things that I like to point out about laws is that there's a story behind them.
Yes.
Something had to happen for it to... Usually something had to have happened for there to be a law to stop it.
There has to be a sequence of events that leads up to Florida having an ordinance that says do not tie your pet alligator to a fire hydrant. I think it's Florida. I'm not sure.
But anyway, war has been going on for so long. Megatron says something to the effect that, our war has been going on for millions of years, and that qualifies us for this special duel where opposing leaders can do battle to determine the fate of the entire army.
Right.
So then it's just us two against each other and not the entire
There's no further
army.
bloodshed.
Right.
There's you preserve the army.
Yeah. And presumably it's in the code of honor and the law that you and your army are exiled if you lose. Otherwise, Megatron would probably be like, "You'll be destroyed if you lose," right. Which would be pretty dark for a kids show. But Transformers gets away with a lot of dark things because they're robots, so it's okay that he's being decapitated and tortured.
They wouldn't be unfamiliar with the concept of execution.
Right. You know how many firing lines has been in this show? We get one at the end of this episode, basically.
Straight up an execution method from like the 1800s.
Right. In season 1 alone.
Even more recent.
Yeah. But anyway, the Transformers wars have been going along for so long that this law had to be put into action and ingrained in the culture in a honor-based situation probably even during peace times,
right?
So that this would be an option.
The concept of Cybertronian warlords just going at it over the years and stuff, and then so many different conflicts getting resolved this way.
And exile to deeper space seems to be a common theme. You've mentioned it. I've mentioned it.
Yeah.
That, Starscream in Starscream's brigade at the end, he's exiled to deeper space.
Just kind of plopped onto an
So that's probably what would have happened to the Autobots. They would have had to be on a green, slimy asteroid in the middle of nowhere.
We also see this concept with the Megatron's Master Plan arc, where... They get exiled. They exile the Autobots into deeper space by manipulating the political situation.
Right. They get sent off into space. They don't know where they're going. Megatron hijacks it to send them into the sun.
Right. The great two-parter. Can't wait to get to that one. But
Megatron just slaps a human.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but this, as I previously mentioned, also kind of would explain Autobots and Decepticons, like Autobots like DevCon or Octane in season 3, where they just kind of are out in space. And we also see that there's like huge alien civilization and everything out there. It's like spaceports, is Flash Gordon style universe and stuff, kind of Star Trek-ish.
Right.
But Cybertronians have like just an established presence, is that nobody bats an eye at it.
Right. The only place that they're bizarre is Earth.
Yeah.
And not for very long.
So these sort of exiles make sense as to that. This could have even been like the Insecticons case as well.
That could be why they ended up on Earth. They might have they might not have been running from war, but they got exiled.
They were
because they kept making clones and eating everything.
So then eventually they were just like, guys, you gotta go.
Which kind of lines up with Earth being, some people refer to it as like kind of a backwater planet.
Yeah, it's a Cybertronian dead zone, essentially.
Right. So it's deeper space.
Yeah, exactly. And
also, in the Marvel comics, I don't remember if this is true or not in the cartoon, but in the comics, Cybertron is free floating throughout space. It
doesn't have an orbit. It doesn't have a sun.
The entire planet got exiled to deeper space.
Cybertronian law was just a consequence of Cybertronian physics. It is ingrained into their entire way of life.
But anyway, so using, this is a typical thing for villains to do to honor-bound heroes, and it's a good angle for Megatron to play against Optimus because...
It's classic.
Yeah, it's classic. But Starscream brings up that the Code of Conduct requires them to fight as is without reinforcement. Now, on the surface, that means, nobody can join in the fight. But also, I presume that it means at the time the challenge was issued. And that's why Megatron shows up first and then gets all the Decepticons' powers. Yeah. Right? So that Teletran couldn't detect that he was powered up, because then Prime could power up to match him. Mm-hmm. He could take the Autobots' powers or something like that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if
a legal
it's
gray
as
area.
is, if it's as is at the time that the issue at the challenge was issued, then Megatron should have buffed up before, because then Optimus, if he wasn't already buffed up, then he would have to fight as he is, and
Right.
Megatron would already be buffed up. So the deception is like an extra layer of, I guess it's like qualifying for the Olympics and then taking steroids.
Yeah. But, like, there's a weird thing where Optimus also uses his gun, and so does Megatron.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a question of, like, why are those allowed? Is this just, like, man-to-man, like, physical combat, or is it just all of the combat as they have, like, all of the tools at their disposal?
Well, it's kind of debatable, because this is something else I was going to bring up about the legality of reinforcements. Megatron turns into a gun.
Yeah.
The arm cannon is the sight, but it's also detachable. So he doesn't have to have the sight on his gun mode. Right? Along with the extended barrel and the arm stock.
Yeah.
So he could technically be necessary to fight without his arm cannon, since it's an attachment.
Yeah.
But since it's also something that comes packaged with his toy, basically, it's also part of him, and he does use it in the fight. Optimus, a lot of times we see weapons just kind of generate. Like in the previous episode, there's a scene where Kickback, I believe, his gun manifests.
Right.
There's like this flash of light, and he has his gun. So it's like, do they kind of grow their guns? Like in later Transformers Prime, where it flips out of their arm or
it's
something
kind of like
that.
a sub transformation.
Right. And then, so like Optimus, obviously in vehicle mode, would have to carry his gun around with him, right? Presumably in his trailer, right?
But the trailer also manifests.
The trailer also just manifests out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And is also somehow connected to him. It's part of him. Like Megatron's accessories, it's an accessory, but it's also part of him, because
it also has distinct entities in it.
Yeah, it also, it has Roller, it has the command deck, battle platform, repair bay thing.
Yeah.
But in the, I believe it's the Attack of the Autobots, they have to reprogram both of Roller and the command deck to... because they insinuate that Optimus is split up into 3 beings.
Right.
Or something like that. It's very confusing.
It's very confusing.
It's also why he's so concerned about Roller. So, like, can he...
Roller
my point
is that, like, a third of his personality,
Right.
so he's just like, no!
Right. So, my question is, can he use his trailer in this fight? He doesn't.
Yeah.
But could he?
Maybe.
They never transform in this fight. Could they have? Is that against the rules? I don't know.
It feels like, granted, this episode has a lot in it, so the fight itself is a little bit crammed in.
Yeah.
It is a good one, but there's a lot that could have been explored with this that just isn't, and I can't fault it for that.
Right.
But
what we're gonna give props for, we both put this down as a note. Soundwave Pets Ravage.
Soundwave Pets Ravage, and it's just it's such a good touch, because he's so cold. He's such a straightforward transformer, and with obviously like really great touches of just snark.
Yeah.
But this is like just a great, distinctly human side to it of like, they do care about like Ravage and the pet Transformers.
Within and we definitely see this in the Headmasters, the cassettes care about their owners. Their cassette player, and the cassette player cares about their cassettes.
And even like Laserbeak getting perched on Megatron's shoulder, and it's like his Falcon sort of thing.
It looks so cool.
Really cool.
But that's while all the Autobots and Decepticons are sitting down to watch the fight like it's some sort of sporting event.
I love this.
Yeah.
This whole setup with them all kind of coming together to like form the audience.
Right.
And just, like, grabbing seats. And it's really cool. I really would have liked to seen, like, Autobots and Decepticons, like, in the same seating area.
Yeah.
And, like, just kind of interacting with each other and stuff.
Just
but,
booing each other's team.
Yeah.
Just snarking at each other.
Right.
But then the Autobots would have overheard Starscream loudly talking about his power chip rectifier. We never mentioned the power chip rectifiers.
Yeah, this scene where Megatron actually, like, gets all of the powers.
Which is the invention that the Constructicons are working on.
Right. It's a big, like, chamber thing.
Yeah.
That I do love, like, the electrodes and stuff that are stuck onto
He's
him.
all hooked up. Like, you would think that because it's a chip. So Starscream says, or Scrapper says that he needs the power chip rectifiers from the Decepticons, and as they talk, we realize basically that this chip is what gives them their individual abilities, like Skywarp's teleporting, Starscream's null ray.
It's also assumed
that
that applies to the Autobots as well.
Right.
Mirage, Hounds, Windcharger.
Yeah, because they have individual powers as well.
Yeah.
Unless it's Decepticon Science.
Yeah. I also imagine that, like, as an aside, power chip rectifiers give them all superpowers.
Yeah.
Bronze is just raw strength. Like, that's his superpower.
It's like Onua's mask of strength.
Yeah.
It's like Onua is already strong, and then he has the Kanoe Pikari.
Right.
And it just makes him extra strong. So it's bionicle tangent there.
That was a good pull on the mask name, too.
Yeah. I remember most of the first season.
I know my bionicle lore.
I know most of the first year Toa masks.
There's so many names.
Right.
But
anyway, that's not what our podcast is about. Maybe one day we'll do a special, but
we will.
Back to Transformers. I love how, you would think that they should just be able to open up Megatron and plug these power chips into him somewhere.
Yeah.
But instead they need this giant mad scientist contraption to zap him with electricity.
Yeah, there's an unfortunate loss of focus on Transformers as, like, somewhat superhero characters.
Yeah.
You see that in, like, animated.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Transformers animated. They lean hard into that. But they don't really have superpowers. It's more of just, like, their...
They got their thing.
Yeah, they got their thing.
They got their gimmick.
Here, they actually have, like, individual powers. That, are kind of like superpowers.
Yeah, and that's why it's called the power chip rectifier.
But there's, like, a superhero vibe to this where I'm a sucker for any sort of, like, mad scientist experiment of, like, transfer this new power into me. Like, it feels very like Green Goblin.
Yeah.
He just gets the boost and him experimenting on himself, and it's like, I don't know. I just love the concept of Megatron hooking himself up to this machine just so that he can get this, like, raw power and be just an absolute unit of a Decepticon.
You bringing up the Green Goblin made me think of, like, he in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, Willem Dafoe, he goes into a chamber and gets gassed up, right? Yeah. And then that just made me think of Sting in the original Dune, the 80s Dune movie. Not the original.
Stepping out, just like...
Yeah, in the steam bath. So now it's just like correlating that with Megatron in
that magnificent lap spread.
And Megatron does do a flex and, like, the glowy energy hand that you love.
Yeah, Optimus does it in the War of the Dinobots, where he does, like, the little energy crackle on his fist.
Right.
And then when Megatron does it in this episode, it's like a supernova.
Right.
And Starscream actually is like, whoa!
Yep. But back to the fight, I want to bring up an interesting point that also this is another little bit of dialogue that contradicts things that that we can work around and build lore off of.
Yeah.
Is Chip. I like how Chip is here for this final
Chip's
episode.
back.
Yeah.
Woo!
But he says, hey, doesn't this remind you of the gladiator fights in Rome? And Ironhide says, maybe it would if I knew what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe it would if I knew what you was talking about. And then Spike talks through Chip's mouth somehow.
Yeah.
Even though they both look off screen to where Spike might be.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this implies that they either Ironhide doesn't correlate the word gladiator with whatever they had on Cybertron.
Right.
Or Cybertron didn't have, in this timeline, doesn't have gladiators.
Yeah.
Or Ironhide just didn't know about the gladiators on Cybertron. Because ironically, Gladiator has become a very well-noted, a very fundamental part of Megatron's origin story.
Yeah. There's the city of Kaon on Cybertron, which is like the underworld.
Right.
And
Not like
huge
the
gladiatorial combat.
post-death underworld, but
Right.
like the criminal underworld.
Yeah.
But there's like gladiator pits, and Megatron starts out as a mining robot who becomes a gladiator, and then rises in power, and then starts the Decepticons as a rebellion against the Autobots.
They're like
and stuff like that.
Lower class rising up against the upper class to overthrow, and then he just like gets more and more political as he goes, and then eventually starts the Decepticon army.
And did you know that that did not start with the Aligned continuity?
Yeah, it was,
nor with
prior.
the live-action continuity.
Yeah.
That's actually based on concepts from, like, I think it's, like, the UK comics or, like, Prose Story that went along with one of the comics or something like that.
Right.
But it's been around for a long time.
It's deeply rooted in Megatron's backstory, but it hasn't really been introduced yet.
Yeah, it's not mentioned in the cartoon. Now, I believe, once again in the Five Faces of Darkness, the flashback to when the Quintessons ruled Cybertron, that there was gladiator fights.
Yeah, and it's
on
implied
Cybertron.
that the Decepticons were built specifically for war and gladiatorial combat.
Right. And actually, if I'm remembering the episode correctly, there are scenes after the Quintessons are driven away from Cybertron where there's still gladiator combat.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the character that's usually pointed out as... Well, he looks like Optimus's friend from War Dawn.
Yes,
but,
Dion.
Yeah. I think he's called U-Haul Prime or something like that.
U-Haul Prime.
I don't know. Anyway, there's a character in there that... Yeah, it's not Dion. It's... some people call him Sentinel Prime. Some people call him like U-Haul or something like that. And he's a gladiator or something like that. But
yeah,
anyway.
there's if this is also like running off of the ancient history that is lost to most of Cybertronian culture nowadays because they don't know what gladiatorial combat is, and also they don't know about the Quintesson origin.
So suppose Ironhide was built sometime during the current war.
He is old. But...
He is old. Yeah, they often call him old timer. So he's probably existed before the war, but but maybe, during the war there's probably no time for gladiator combat, and then
also in some of the
maybe before that, during the Golden Age, they didn't have gladiators.
Yeah.
So it is entirely possible that he just doesn't know what a gladiator is.
And in War Dawn, I believe they also mentioned that Megatron, when he comes onto the scene, nobody's really seen him before, and nobody's seen anyone as powerful or durable as he is.
Right.
So you still could have the gladiatorial combat origin.
Yes.
In that he was just so underground, built up his whole army, and then came into the spotlight. And just nobody knows. Because
that is one of the tenets of his origin story, is that, while Cybertron's having a great time, he's suffering in the pits.
Exactly.
Also, I was just thinking that kind of contradicts when the Constructicons build him in the Five Faces of Darkness. It's implied that he's built in the middle of war. So either that's a previous war, or it's just a misstep with, because he shows up during the Golden Age.
Or there's a recolor of him somewhere. There's just another guy who has the same model as him.
Anyway.
Goodness, there's so many layers to this.
So many, yeah. This episode alone has so much lore.
Dense.
Yeah. Thanks, G1, for not being a consistent thing that makes it more interesting somehow.
If anything has taught me, if Elden Ring, the Souls-like games, all of these different franchises that intentionally lean into minimalist lore, has taught me anything, it's that the less there is, the more there is to dig into.
Right. And honestly, all these contradictions are more realistic, I feel like, because we always act like, oh, the lore needs to be completely spelled out.
Nah.
But that's not how history is actually written.
Huge chunks that we just do not know.
Yeah, there's huge chunks that we don't know. There's constantly new discoveries. Things that we thought we knew are being contradicted. It's like science. You know, history is a science. We're constantly learning new things that contradict what we thought we knew.
So in reality, the G1 Transformers cartoon
is more realistic.
It's extremely subtle. And this is why we have the podcast.
Anyway.
We bring the truth.
Yeah. All this from... It's like the meme. It's like the meme. It's like, you know, oh, the lore, all this information, you know, all the crazy stuff. Haha, Transformer, go pew pew.
Yeah.
Speaking of pew pew, what happens in the fight?
Megatron, honestly, I really like this fight. I think just on like an animation level, it's kind of really dynamic.
There's some dynamic poses.
Yeah, there's some really cool like angular poses and some smooth animation. Granted, this has like some of the most prominent like miscolors and animation errors that I've seen in a while.
In season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's partially because that this episode kind of... The remastering process was not perfect.
It was
on this
not
episode.
kind to this episode.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff they had to just salvage from like wrecks of tape and stuff. It's kind of sad.
The preservation wasn't terrific on this, but
yeah,
it looks nice. And also in season 1, we talked about it before, but like there's the rounded character designs where they have like more kind of angular and, rounded shapes,
curved designs. Yeah, it's because I believe the first season of Transformers and much of the second season was handled with Toei Animation, which is famous for a lot of various anime.
Yeah. You probably know some of them.
Yeah.
Just a little underground indie one known as Dragon Ball.
Right. Also Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
Also, some of the episodes were handled by ACOM. Those are the more mushy looking ones that we were talking about from season 2 and 3.
They look a little moldy.
Yeah. And a few other studios. However, between the first and second season, they had a change in character designer. And there's this really great YouTube video I was watching a while back by a channel called Iron Mysterian, called The Hidden History of the Transformers Cartoon in Japan, from Marvel to Toei and back.
Interesting.
Which went really in depth about the relationship between Hasbro and Takara and the production of the cartoon and the different animation studios and Marvel and Sunbow and how it was kind of produced and stuff, and the whole Japanese side of it. And I assume they are well researched. They sound very well researched. Yeah. I'm not in depth enough to know what they got right and wrong. So I assume that all of this information was very good. But it was very interesting. And it explained a lot of interesting things about why the animation looks different between season 1 and 2 and certainly in season 3.
We can link that in the description as well. So go check it out.
Yeah. But it's just interesting because you and I have always noticed that in season 1 they're more angular, kind of more mecha looking, and then season 2 they're more blocky, kind of more robot looking,
right?
You know,
very rigid,
more real robot looking, kind of sort of. And then the movie just is some of the greatest mecha animation of the 80s.
So good.
Which also he has a video on the Japanese side of that production as well, which is very interesting.
Cool. And then there's season 3.
And then there's season 3. Season 3 has some good episodes that look like they were also produced by Toei, but most of them were produced by ACOM, and those are the mushy looking ones. Which I don't hate as much as some other people do.
It doesn't look atrocious.
There are a lot of errors with characters here and there that aren't supposed to be.
Yes.
But now we're way off topic, and let's get back to the fight.
Anyway, Megatron and his powers, as so gracefully narrated to us by Starscream.
Yeah.
Just kind of explaining to whoever will listen.
Right. But I think it's funny that the first thing that he starts out with, because Optimus and Megatron, shout at each other. Optimus says, "Remember the law. It's a fair fight," and then Megatron reminds him, "With the loser exiled to deeper space." And then, of course,
I love his little Joker hand buzzer.
Right.
It's like shake
he starts out with a zappy hand, zaps Optimus and throws him. So he's got zappy hand and super strength. Then Starscream apparently has cluster bombs, which I'm not sure we've really seen.
I don't think we've ever seen them,
or at least we've never noticed them as an individual thing.
It just looks like an energy ball that explodes on contact.
Right. And then the null ray.
Yeah.
Which I think maybe...
I think that was in the hand zap, but I'm not sure.
No, it's when he shoots... Because he shoots Optimus, and he kind of, slows down, and it's not really played up, but Starscream mentions that it is the null ray.
Right.
Then when he does the rumble earthquake by just punching instead of transforming, I think that probably would have given it away if he transformed his arm into the pile driver, but I think that's why Optimus just stands there and falls into the chasm.
Yeah, because he's nulled.
Because he got hit by the null ray, which instead of completely freezing him like other things, it kind of numbs him and slows him down. And then he uses a gun.
Yeah.
And then Reflector's shiny chest, Thundercracker's sonic blast, which seems more like a sound wave thing, but
it's been stated that he can make sonic booms at commands, but this was like a long sustained sound blast, which seems more like sound waves thing.
Right. Then,
but Starscream said,
in fact, Soundwave never gets. I guess either he didn't contribute his power chip rectifier, or Megatron never used it because then he'd be spitting out cassettes that don't have toys.
Yeah.
Then the gun and the fusion cannon.
Skywarp teleports. At some point.
Yeah, because Optimus throws a boulder at him.
Yeah.
He's just like,
I just gotta
throw a boulder. But he's also got some weird triangle laser that comes out of his hand.
Yeah, he opens his palm and it shoots out from there.
Which reminds me of the triangles at the end of the lasers that the Autobots use to stop the time warps in the Dinobot Island episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Just an odd little thing.
Not bad. One thing that I do love about this fight is the instant that Optimus gets chucked by Megatron.
Yeah.
He mentions to himself, I never knew he was that strong.
Yeah.
Which puts a lot of insight into their dynamic as war leaders, is that when they do interact, it's on the field of battle. They're usually shooting at each other. They do have hand-to-hand scuffles. It's not that often, and not often enough to where they actually have a good gauge of how powerful they are. It's been millions of years at this point.
Well, they've had several hand-to-hands since they've been on Earth.
Exactly.
They had the fight on top of the dam. They had the shoving match before the victory took off.
Yes.
They had the fight in the power plant at the beginning of Transport to Oblivion. At the beginning of Transport to Oblivion. And then I feel like they had hand-to-hand combat in the Ultimate Doom also. At least when he was trying to get...
More than I remember.
Yeah. And in Countdown to Extinction.
Okay. So almost every episode.
And in Fire in the Sky with the crystal swords.
Yeah. Nevertheless, it is a cool line.
Yes. I mean, that explains why he didn't think he was that powerful. It's I've been fighting him at this power level, and he just went Super Saiyan.
Right.
I didn't know he could do that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it seems like, that should not be too surprising that Transformers are constantly pulling new powers out of their butt. You know? Or, in this case, the slidey hand magic tech.
Slidey hand magic tech, baby. I do like the crowd reactions and stuff from the Autobots and Decepticons where, they're really in on it, and the Autobot, you can hear in like just kind of the generic voice lines and stuff. They're like, get him, yeah.
Right. Yeah, the Autobots are cheering on Optimus, and you can get up, you can do it.
Yeah.
You know, don't give up, and stuff
It's
like
like a boxing match.
But once again, we get the classic exploded into commercial break.
Yeah.
And this kind of brings up that there's a solid 3-act structure to this thing where it's very specifically. Before the first commercial break, there is the setup, and Megatron gets his powers and puts his plan into motion. Then the second segment is very specifically around the duel.
Yeah.
And then and the Constructicons sneaking into the base. And then the third act is very solidly after the duel.
Right.
So it's very specifically split up into this 3-act of before, during, and after the duel.
Some good plotting.
Yeah. Season 1 has good plots.
We both mentioned this, but on Optimus's defeat, he's super weak, and they have to transport him back to the base and make sure that he can like still function.
Yeah.
And he transforms, but Huffer steps in and takes the trailer, and who usually would probably complain about having to do that.
Yeah.
But the fact that he actively takes the step to take the trailer, and he's like, let me give you take a load off.
Yeah.
And
I'll carry the trailer for you.
And Optimus says, you're a true friend, Huffer.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
it's a
that's
sweet
sweet
little moment.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's nice. The Decepticons have Soundwave petting Ravage, and the Autobots have Huffer taking the trailer.
Yeah. And it's so funny because he's a little truck too.
He's such a tiny little truck.
He fit, but so he's just this tiny little truck with a big old trailer.
And canonically, he's also like one of the strongest, like right next to Brawn. So
yeah. Or at least according to Dinobot Island.
Yeah.
According to him,
Brawn is the type that will show you how strong he is. Yeah. Huffer is the one who will complain all the way up to the point where he shows you how strong he is.
Right. And then also a neat little detail there was a recent toy or figure of Huffer that is compatible with Optimus's trailer.
That's a lot of fun. I love that.
But something interesting I noticed after the fight. Again, Megatron gloats a lot. He's so happy too. He's like woo! He's just immediately after he beats Optimus. All right, y'all, get to space.
It's like, oh, you know what comes next?
Get over there.
Get over there. Come on, eat it. Eat it.
And the funny thing is, the Autobots want to fight out of turn again. This is the second time that. Optimus in Countdown to Extinction, the Optimus says, "Retreat, stay in cover," and Wheeljack says, "I don't want to. I don't want to take cover. I want to fight in the clear."
Yeah.
And we speculated last episode that that might have been like revenge for what they did to Earth. And in this episode, it's clearly revenge for what they did to Optimus.
There's a kind of an interesting element to the Autobots that. What would they be like without Optimus's leadership and his like very strong like moral code?
Yeah.
There is the argument that could be made that they would be very like vengeance and gung-ho driven. Mm-hmm. And you can actually see that with like the Wreckers or something. And
the
in the Marvel comics,
faction.
you see like when Grimlock takes over the Autobots.
Yeah.
And there's a group of them that are like way more on board with it. Most of them are super reluctant.
Yeah.
But there's a cool concept of like without Optimus's like tempering of their fighting spirit, they could easily get out of hand.
Yeah.
And be a lot more like vengeance driven.
And we do actually get to see a little bit in Generation 1 cartoon what it's like without Optimus during the movie and Season 3. Much of Season 3. We see different leaders of the Autobots.
Yeah. Different leadership styles.
Right. And then it's a totally different dynamic. Of course, it's totally different characters, but it's also a totally different dynamic.
Exactly.
And that brings me back to something you said during our Dinobot War of the Dinobots episode about the training that the Autobot training that has been instilled in the Dinobots to be more compassionate, and that probably comes, it's at least got to be approved by Optimus, and it's probably been greatly influenced by Optimus.
Weirdly enough, it leans into the concept of the Autobots being a creed and a allegiance rather than a species. even though that's like the predominant
right.
G1
I've always had a
theming.
problem with that.
It just feels weird.
Yeah, but also it makes sense, but it also feels weird that the Autobots and Decepticons are completely different species.
Yeah.
But it also makes sense in a lot of ways.
Right. There's the debate around, or not a debate, but kind of, there's an argument that can be made around, like, that's an ancestry and a heritage more than anything else.
Yeah.
But it's weird.
Yeah. Especially since we don't see a lot of, in the G1 cartoon, a lot of Autobots going over to the Decepticon side, and we see a few Decepticons going over to the Autobot side.
Yeah.
But generally, we don't see Autobots going over to the Decepticon side.
Yeah.
Well, we do see Autobots teaming up with Decepticons, like in the Master Builders, when Hoist and Grapple team up with the Constructicons.
Yes.
Because Grapple just wants to build.
Yeah.
He doesn't care who's signing the checks. He just wants to build.
Right.
But,
Grapple is the Oppenheimer of the Autobots.
But we'll discuss that when we get to that episode.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring up about Exile to Deeper Space, the Autobots go back to their ship and they're getting ready to go back to space, right? How are they going to go back to space? Their ship is still buried under the mountain.
Exactly. Maybe it's all of the prep that they did at the end of More Than Meets the Eye Part 3.
And then just
where it's
never...
like, well, we're going to go back to space. And they're just chilling.
Maybe that's why the Decepticons go... that's why Megatron says, we will go with them to make sure that they don't procrastinate anymore and actually get their ship out and go back to space.
Could very well be.
But anyway, while all this is going on, the Constructicons have tunneled under the volcano where they find out that it's still active, which is interesting because Ironhide blocked up most of the volcano in Ultimate Doom, but it's still active underneath.
How volatile is this volcano?
Right. You know, it blows up at the beginning of this season, then it blows up again during the Ultimate Doom, and then it's still active in this one. And then, what's the Constructicon's name of the... Scavenger, thank you. I don't know why I could not remember his name for some reason. Because he calls him Scrounge in that.
Scrapper is the, he's got the scoop.
Yeah.
Scavenger has the crane arm.
The crane scoop.
The crane scoop arm.
The crane hook.
The excavator. Hook has the hook. Mixmaster is the cement mixer.
Yeah.
Long haul is the dump truck, and I blank on the other ones.
That's it, isn't it?
Is it?
No. We're missing an arm.
We are missing an arm. Who is it?
We watched this episode, I promise.
Granted, the Constructicons don't get much of... Well, they do get, like, the roundhouse introduction at the beginning, where it's like, you know, fall in formation, and Scrapper introduces them all by name.
Bone Crusher.
Bone
That's
Crusher.
the one that we forgot.
Thank you.
And
What does he turn into?
He is also like Scrapper. Scrapper has wheels and Bone Crusher has treads.
That's right. Okay.
I'm looking at a picture of him.
Gotcha. That's helpful.
Yeah.
But they get an introduction in this episode. They don't get much of a personality introduction.
Other than Scrapper. And Mixmaster.
Yeah.
Who goes into like...
He's a nerd.
high school chemistry alchemy.
Yeah.
I remember going through a chemistry class, and then I was like, oh, I know what he's talking about now.
Yeah. H2SO4, baby.
Yeah, HCl or something like that. And it's like, those are like the most basic acids.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They melt their way.
But at the time, I was so elated to know what he was talking about. But yeah. So they melt their way into the Autobot base, and our Teletran 1 wakes up the Dinobots. Are they just kind of standing around sleeping?
They are just kind of standing there.
It's not really established, but kind of implied that maybe they're in their room that was introduced in the Ultimate Doom.
Yeah. Curiously, their eyes are lighting up with the alarm.
Right.
I had the thought that maybe they had an implant that like directly linked them with Teletran.
Yeah.
Which is why they're so responsive to Teletran's orders.
And that might also be one of the improvements that Wheeljack made to their brains, is that they're hooked up to Teletran.
Right.
Except that would mean that in Five Faces of Darkness again, when Teletran's destroyed once and for all, that the Dinobots would loot, which would explain why Grimlock's dumb in Season 3.
And explains why he's so apt to build the Computron.
Yeah!
The Technobots. It all
Oh my goodness! This episode,
There's so much!
we are solving so many plot holes in G1 today.
We're solving Transformers, guys.
Thanks for listening to our TED Talk.
We bring you the truth.
We've solved Transformers. Anyway, oh my goodness.
Lord.
Anyway,
But
why have I mentioned Five Faces so much today? We're gonna get to those episodes, and I'm not gonna have anything to say because I've already said it all.
I can't wait to get there because I hate those episodes.
Anyway,
Constructicon Dinobot rivalry.
okay, hang on. Help me remember. Does Grimlock have his round face or his square
He has
face
his
in
round
this
face
episode?
because I specifically remember War for the Dinobots having the season 2 head
Yeah,
design,
yeah, the square.
which is my favorite.
Yeah.
And then this one goes back to the original head design.
Yeah, and that's also the design that much of season 3 uses for Grimlock. The few times that he shows up
It's
in
like robot mode like 3 times.
Yeah. The first of which is, say it with me, Five Faces in the Darkness. That's going to be the thing that you kill me over in this episode.
There's one thing I love about this is when the Constructicons bust in and they're like, destroy Teletran 1, and Grimlock's wonderfully delivered line of like, no, destroy Teletran 1, Dinobots destroy you.
I love that. And that'll give me a chance to go ahead and say, well, actually, I'll save this till the end of this part because it ties in with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that line. They also have a new vocoder in this. I think this is
like
the
a
only episode
growl.
where they're like really growly and
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. But interestingly, Swoop isn't here.
yeah, he is.
He
He's in
isn't
the
there to
fight.
begin with. He shows up later.
Yeah.
But he's just
once
there.
they're outside. He's not inside the arc, but he does show up once they're outside the arc.
But they like start shooting out with each other.
They start a shootout.
They blow a hole in the whole side of the volcano.
It makes me laugh every time I watch this episode because that hole is bigger than the arc
itself. And it's just the slow pan in.
Yeah.
And then it's just
boom. And the Constructicons are visibly terrified.
Yeah,
by
they're
these
on the
guys.
back foot.
I love the line where Hook says, "It's bad news. They brought in the heavy artillery."
Yeah.
And
And Snarl's line, Slag's line of Dinobots no fool around anymore.
And then they turn into dinosaur mode,
Yeah.
and they get more dangerous.
Right. And the Constructicons were already on the back foot, already
so-
terrified.
It's such
And then
a
they're
good
like,
scene.
all right, let's go all out now.
Right.
And this also is like canonically says they are more powerful in their dinosaur forms than they are in their robot forms.
Which is something that's carried on through season 2 into Desertion of the Dinobots. But then they combine, and I love when they're talking about like phase 1, phase 2, and stuff
Yeah.
like that, where it's like, all right, phase 1 is the legs, phase 2 is the upper torso, and then phase 3 is the arms, and now we're Devastator.
Yeah.
You know, it feels realistic. It's got that military feel that I
Yes.
talk about in season 1 a lot.
This is an operation.
This is an operation, but it also sounds very Power Rangers.
Yeah.
You know, very Super Sentai combining
Link up.
robot, sort of thing. It's great. Devastator sometimes has eyes in this episode. Sometimes he has
Sometimes the visor.
goggles. It's
Yeah.
kind of weird.
The visor
but
look
I
is-
love his voice.
Yes.
I love the layering on his voice.
The layering, he speaks in very like
The effects.
broad strokes of like nothing defeats Devastator. And
Yes.
he's just really bombastic. It is interesting to note that most of the time they imply that he's dumber in Devastator
Yeah.
form. Here it doesn't really show through.
Right.
He's just kind of regular. It is
Yeah.
interesting that
He's just a really big transformer, and the when the Autobots are returning to their base, they see all of this going on outside their base, and
Yeah.
Spike's terrified. What is that?
what's going on?
And then they're all like, "What the heck?
We gotta do
whatever."
something.
And then Optimus is like, "No, remember the law." And they abandon
Yeah.
the Dinobots.
This implies that
our Dino buddies.
Yeah. Our Dino buddies are in trouble. They don't say that they're Decepticons. They just say that they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And
Optimus assumes they're Decepticons, that's why he doesn't engage in the fight.
Right.
But this also implies that the Dinobots are not covered under the law.
Yeah.
Either they're not citizens of Cybertron because they were built on Earth, and therefore the law doesn't apply to them, or because they're a subgroup. They're the Dinobots. They're not Autobots. They're the Dinobots. Right. Even though they've multiple times said the Dinobots will remain among us, and you've got Autobot training, and you're thinking like a good Autobot, stuff like that. They might not be covered under the Autobot. They might not actually be technically Autobots, and that's why they're allowed to continue to fight. And Megatron doesn't protest. He doesn't say, Prime, call back your Dinobots. He just like, this is fine. We're just going to watch this fight.
The funny thing is that this implies that Dinobots get up to stuff like this on the regular.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, they come back from a mission and they see them just trashing, like, I don't know, some giant robot or something.
Right.
And it's like, oh, what have you guys done?
Yeah.
Off doing Dinobot shenanigans.
And I find that very interesting that because they don't have the personality chips from Cybertron, or and they weren't created by or programmed by Vector Sigma, either that or because they're not technically Autobots, they don't fall under the law. So the Autobots could leave the Dinobots on Earth.
It's fascinating.
And maybe they're
also
citizens of Earth. Earth, what do you call it? Natives of Earth.
Yeah.
Because they were built there.
Naturalized.
I don't know, something like that.
It's fascinating, but it's also very funny unintentionally.
Yeah, it is.
But they fix up Optimus, and we also get like a startlingly detailed shot of his interior.
And yet still no Matrix.
Yeah.
Which kind of debunks what I said about the previous episode about knowing about the stuff planned in the movie.
Right.
Of course, the Matrix didn't take form until much later in the production. There's a brilliant... we'll talk about this when we do the movie in season 3, but there's a lot of brilliant material out there right now detailing the production of Chris McFeely.
Yes. The Basics.
The Basics on Transformers has a wonderful episode about it.
Yeah. I do like that you point out that Chip and Teletran are a dynamic duo.
Yeah, they're this comes back up from that previous episode, the Divide and Conquer.
Yeah, just like Sherlock Holmes with floppy disks.
That's one of the cringiest lines in G1. I think there's a few that are more cringy than that.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get a lot of cringy ones in season 2 and 3, but it's up there.
But they catch wind of the deception, and they are immediately like, oh, we gotta go get some Decepticons.
Oh, yeah. They just immediately turn back on them. And they create a giant hologram guy that vaguely looks like Broadside's alternate design from season 3.
He's got a lot of like color scheme differences.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely not him, but it could be like Hound remembered him, or something.
I like to think that he's like a mythological
Autobot. I like that
something.
too. Maybe this is the...
it's like a Beowulf figure or something.
Yeah, or like, you remember the last Autobot in the Marvel comics?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Right.
Yeah. I like that better.
And I also like that, one, Devastator... he kind of has the Dinobots on the back foot a little bit.
Yeah.
And he starts gloating, and then he looks so terrified of this dude.
Yeah. But yeah, the whole fight with the Dinobots is really good. And then and Devastator, and then they open up the lava chasm that they then shoot. And I discussed this earlier. Optimus one shots Devastator.
Yeah. Weak point, but it also leans into Optimus being the best sharpshooter on the Autobot team.
Yeah. And that leads into Optimus's thing about no, Megatron, you won't have to fight all the Autobots, just me. And then he shoots him and he falls in. After all the other Autobots have
Great
shot all
comeuppance on Constructicons go down, and then the Decepticons are like, oh, what do we do? And they just slowly get backed into the chasm.
Right. It's kind of terrifying to watch the Dinobots chase the Constructicons into the lava.
Yeah.
And then all the Autobots just gun down the Decepticons. And I wonder if because they didn't have their power chip rectifiers, they were more weak, and that's why they all fell in the lava.
Yeah. Like, this is the send-off. and stuff. Of like,
Yeah.
we kind of come full circle. We get classic Skeptimus Prime.
Yeah.
Spike asking,
We
is it
actually-
really over? And
We
he's
actually
like,
even get like this purple smoke come up from the lava,
Like a
implying
smelting.
like they smelted in there. Yeah, they
kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Megatron does, like, when he falls in the lava, it's
a
like
little Terminator fist.
Terminator.
Yeah.
But I love that Optimus, he's Skeptimus Prime again, and he's like, who can say, really, when anything is over?
Right.
And then Megatron giving his classic, we shall rise again.
Right.
It feels like it's bringing season 1 all full circle.
It
This
really
is classic.
does feel like this is a really good wrap up for
Skeptimus
season
Prime
1.
and Revengeance Megatron.
Right. I find it interesting that this whole episode is a good highlight of the way that Optimus and Megatron rely on their teams. They both rely on them, but in different ways. Megatron just uses them for their powers.
Yeah.
And in this case, he just takes their powers, you know? And that's like a personification of that idea. And then Optimus on the other hand is clever. He's clever because he shoots he has Hound create the hologram, and then he shoots Devastator in the weak spot. But he respects his teammates, and he wants all of them to have their chance to do what they're best at.
Exactly.
You know?
He respects them as individuals,
Right,
not just
because
as assets.
he doesn't create a hologram. He has Hound create the hologram. You know,
Right.
it's probably his plan, but he has Hound do that part.
Yeah.
He has he lets Huffer carry his load for him.
Exactly.
He lets Ironhide go ballistic.
Exactly.
He trusts the Dinobots to protect the Ark. You know, stuff like that.
And this is a learned skill, because everything that we brought up with the war with the Dinobots and that whole Optimus as a general versus Optimus as a family leader.
Yeah, that kind of leans into our sort of recap of season 1. But first, I want to say that there's a lot of opposites in this episode. You got the opposite teams, the Autobots, the Decepticons. You got the Constructicons, the constructed Constructicons. You've got the constructed Dinobots.
Yeah.
You know, and it's even in the dialogue, because I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. There's the line, "Hey, you all must contribute power chip rectifiers," and then Starscream immediately opposites that with, "But I need my power chip rectifier." And then
That is honestly one of my favorite lines.
yeah. I love lines like that where it's like one thing is said and then the immediate next thing is the same line but it reversed.
Yeah.
You know,
But I need
Uno
that.
reverse cars.
Yeah.
You know, and then Grimlock says, "No, destroy Teletran 1. Dinobots destroy you."
Whoa,
And then-
how the turntables.
Yeah. And then Optimus says, "It is ended," when Megatron goes in the lava, and then Spike says, "Is it really over?" And then he's like, nah. He says, "Who can say? In this vast universe, is anything really forever?" And then Megatron just immediately pops back out and is like, "We'll be back."
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of leads us into our season 1 recap. How do you feel all of these episodes? We'll be brief about this, but how do you feel with no notes, as I see that neither of us took a note for this, but
Honestly, there's so much...
how do you feel about all of these episodes going together and telling a cohesive story?
There's way less episodic shenanigans than I remember from season 1. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we read into it way too much.
Right.
But there is a lot of meat there.
Yeah.
Like, there's some thick, lean meat that, we're actually able
Thick, lean meat.
Yeah. There's actually some beef to the thematic undertones, the character arcs and stuff. It never gets like full focus, but it is there.
Yeah. I feel like in a more modern show like Transformers Prime or Transformers Animated, they probably map out the season more to say,
There's a lot more of,
these
like,
are the
this is Bumblebee's
specific
character
arcs
arc
that we
episode.
want to tell and weave in and out.
Yeah.
And, where we're going. Whereas this is more...
This is like emergent themes, emergent narrative.
Right. They had ideas and a vague... plan of where they're going. Of course, they create the production Bible. They've got, all of their character profiles. They've got probably their planned episodes, because they do plan the season out in advance. But it does feel like, okay, we came up with these ideas. These are the episodes that we're making. Now maybe we can spice them up a little bit, because probably a lot of these episodes were made out of order, and they certainly aired out of order, their production things.
But it was very
different
foundational.
But is it? Yeah. So they probably had an idea, but they probably didn't plan it as in depth as they would have with a newer show,
right?
Because this is supposed to be a
By the
Saturday morning toy commercial, basically.
Exactly.
But I feel that the story arc throughout season 1 is very interesting, because you have the Autobots come to Earth. And through our discussions that we've talked about. The Autobots and Decepticons come to Earth. They wake up. They start learning. You kind of have this learning phase. You have the space bridge. There's the immediate danger of stopping the Decepticons from returning to Cybertron.
Yeah.
Then you have the space bridge arc, where they're trying to establish connection. Right?
Exactly.
Then you have another learning and new characters arc with all the Skyfire and Dinobots episodes.
Yeah.
Then you have this desperate plan where the Autobots keep stopping the Decepticons, so the Decepticons start for this. They go for this last gambit to bring Cybertron to Earth.
Go big.
Yeah, go big or go home. And in this case, both.
Yeah. Go big or bring home.
Right. There's just a few episodes where they clean up the mess. Yeah. And while we do have the Insecticons kind of be introduced in pretty late in the game, it does feel like, okay,
this is in between.
We cannot handle another full-scale assault with Ultimate Doom, because even the Insecticons episodes does feel like it's smaller scale than some of the grander scale. Because in Skyfire and Dinobot episodes, the Decepticons are stealing a big thing, or they're doing some big they're doing some grand assault.
This one's an oil refinery.
Yeah, this one's just an oil refinery, so it does actually kind of play into that story as well.
Yeah.
So I think what we see here is that first they learn about the planet, then they're trying to establish contact with their home planet. Yeah. Then they're trying to then through learning about the planet, they bring it in new characters. And Optimus and Megatron, their arcs kind of go with Megatron is first just about getting back and getting enough energy to get back and get back first so that he can, plant his flag.
The Cybertronian purist motivation is still there.
But then he starts realizing, okay, what can we take from this planet in specific? What can...
more resources here than originally
And
thought.
Optimus is, first it's my duty to just run this as an operation, and then over the course he learns to care more, in the Dinobot episodes, learns to care more about his people. In the Ultimate Doom, that primes him to care more about Earth than Cybertron. And then because they've exhausted so much in the Ultimate Doom arc that, finally Megatron gets desperate enough to bring that in because the Autobots just keep stopping him. And then that's exhausted so much resources that everything has to be smaller scale after that. And that's why that primes...
primes.
That primes Megatron to want to do the duel. Yeah. Because he's like, we cannot waste any more energy.
Let's try and bring this to a head as best as we possibly can.
And that's what primes Prime to accept the duel is because he has grown to respect his people and the Earth so much more over the course of season 1 that it's like, okay, if better me than all of my people, and if I can win, then I can save the Earth from the Decepticons. And then so that's how we end up there. So there is kind of a
there's a rich progression.
There is a progression of the characters over the course of, and that's probably why Megatron's so interested in the Insecticons, is because he's got no plans at that point. He's just
I guess I can rely on these guys.
We're still waiting on the Constructicons to be finished. So I'm not ready for the others. It probably, before he thought of the duel, he was originally going to just send the Constructicons to attack the Ark or something, But who knows,
Yeah, and I think Season 2 has a lot more character-centric
where
focus.
the whole episode is about one character's arc.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's just, this is all about this one character's adventure. And stuff like sometimes it's not even like any sort of character arc or anything.
Right. It's just what happens to them.
Right. It feels like because there's a wider range of new characters introduced, each one kind of gets like a spotlight episode or multiple.
So, but
this
in
one feels
season
more like
one,
the broader narrative strokes of season one.
Because you do have kind of an overarching story going on.
Exactly.
And it all makes sense in the background, but all of that overarching story isn't present enough to distract you from, this is the episode of the week. You know? You can watch these episodes in isolation, except for the multi-parters, or watching them as arcs gives you a bigger story.
Yeah. There's Ghost in the Shell, Standalone Complex, has a great format of the standalone episodes and then the complex episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, one is just like kind of this little thing, this little adventure establishes something about characters or something about the world.
Right.
The complex one is like the broader continuity of the plot and stuff. So I feel like season one is complex episodes. Like almost all of them are complex episodes.
Right.
Any character stuff is like flavor dressing.
Yeah.
Season two is all standalone episodes of all flavor dressing. There's not really broad strokes. It's mostly like adventure of the week sort of stuff. But
and I feel like you could, with season 2 you can really shuffle episodes if you wanted to.
Yeah.
With season 1 you get a richer narrative if you watch them in order, but there are still a few episodes where you can shuffle them around.
Exactly.
Like
I think like the Roll for It,
as long as
stuff like that.
As long as Fire on the Mountain comes after Fire in the Sky and before Ultimate Doom, then you're probably good. Oh, and before Plague of Insecticons, you're probably good as far as continuity with Skyfire.
Yeah. Or he could just show up. You never know.
As long as War of the Dinobots comes before Ultimate Doom, because all 5 Dinobots are there.
Exactly.
But after SOS Dinobots, you're probably good.
Yeah.
And while you could, and then the Space Bridge arc, I feel like kind of creates a continuity that follows up on More Than Meets the Eye.
Right.
But if you wanted to, you could take some of like SOS Dinobots or Fire on the Mountain, Fire in the Sky, and put them before, you could sprinkle them in the space.
Leeway.
You could sprinkle them in the Space Bridge arc if you wanted to,
Syndication and everything. I remember as a kid, and I know a lot of other kids are like this as well, you pick up on continuity way quicker than a lot of people think you would.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, hey, this guy's here. He wasn't here in the last episode. Or, like... You don't.
It's easy.
Your brain
it's
isn't broken.
It's easier for young kids to pick up on continuity than people think it is.
Yeah, like I remember just like rolling with it more often than not. Just like, oh, okay.
Oh, so this must come after that. Right. Okay, here, let me tell you a funny piece of continuity that I thought. I thought that all Transformer cartoons were in the same timeline. So the Transformers the movie had to come at the very end because Optimus dies, right? Because I hadn't seen season 3 at that point.
Right.
So I thought that, you watch season 1 of G1, then you watch Transformers Energon, because those were the only ones that I knew at that point, and then the movie, right?
The penultimate.
and then we watch like Beast Wars.
Yes.
Beast Wars, we gotta fit that in there somewhere, and then I started to... after that, I started to realize that there was lots of different continuities and timelines and stuff like that, you know. But
Transformers is
yeah,
kind
so
of,
I thought that the movie was the final thing in all of Transformers.
this is the ultimate movie.
Right. Because
It all
Optimus
ends
died.
after this.
Yeah. That movie shaped me, man.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that later.
Oh, yeah.
On a lighter note, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll do the PSAs.
Yeah.
We now return to Robots in Disguise.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so the PSAs. Yeah, let me explain what they are real quick. So back in like the 80s, when the whole kids cartoons being commercials and full of violence was just getting started, some shows decided to sort of like
Use the characters
use PSA, public service announcements, basically as like a sort of self-defense, like, no, see, we're educational.
Yeah.
And basically they'd have characters come on and be like, hey,
don't do bad things.
You know, like some kids would be doing something silly. In these Transformer ones specifically, kids are getting into trouble, and then a Transformer shows up and is like, hey, kids, don't be dumb.
Yeah.
And then,
but this all stemmed from the G.I. Joe PSAs.
no, it actually, I
Or were they
believe,
concurrent?
I believe it started with He-Man, but G.I. Joe
okay.
did them. Yeah, TF Wiki has a page on the PSAs that goes into more detail. Because of course my PSA right now is, if you don't know something about Transformers, go to TF Wiki. It's got just about everything.
Go to TF Wiki. Spend about 15 minutes on there. Realize that you've been on there for an hour.
Yep. Anyway, and they've got a history of the public service announcements segment here, and of course, you know, like any good wiki. Well, I was about to praise them for having sources cited, but this page does not have sources cited.
It's
Bad TF Wiki.
It's like anything on the internet. If somebody says it confidently enough, you can trust them.
Yeah. But this is the general gist. These public service announcements for Transformers were planned to be released like late with season 2 and with season 3, I think.
Okay.
But
I noticed that most of these characters that were in here were season 2 characters.
Right. However, I don't think they actually aired when the show was running.
Interesting.
But they've since surfaced on. They were a bonus. I remember the first time I encountered them. They were bonus features on the DVD collection of Generation 1 that I have.
They are also unlockables in the Transformers Armada PlayStation 2 game, which is a lot of fun.
Thank you. I was about to mention that. Yeah, that's where I was going. But thank you. You got it. So what are these? What happens in these? Each one's like
They're
short,
like 30 seconds each.
Yeah.
Maybe less.
Yeah. The first one is "Don't Run Away from Home," in which a teenager is telling his friend that he's running away from home, and then Bumblebee shows up in a rainstorm.
Yeah.
This was so funny because we had this like memorized. You want to act it out.
First line is, "I'm running away from home. My parents are mean.
Where will you go?
I'm not sure, but I'll show them."
And then Bumblebee drives up. This is all in the rain, you know, with this cheesy 80s music in the background. Which is actually a theme that gets played in season 3, I think.
I think
And then
so,
Bumblebee shows up and says, "That's right, you'll show him how mean you can be."
Bumblebee!
Don't you think you better try talking to your parents about your problems rather than just running away?
As the clouds part and birds emerge.
Yeah. Start
Then
singing.
maybe I could start talking to my parents again.
I forget the lines after that.
Yeah, tell them how you feel. And remember, running away
Change is nothing. Now I know.
and knowing is half the battle. And that was a tagline that was in like all of the G.I. Joe PSAs as well.
And
Which I think
you may have seen the memes where it says, "And knowing is half the battle. The other half is violence."
Yeah. But they were kind of like concurrent with each other.
Right.
But
In fact, according to TF Wiki, these episodes are actually just reuses of the same scripts from the G.I. Joe PSAs. There's more PSAs. I remember watching one of the G.I. Joe ones about like fire or something.
Yeah.
But anyway.
One of them got like really serious about like kidnapping or something like that.
Wow.
It was like an extended one.
Yeah,
So
that was during the whole kidnapping scare, probably.
It was the 80s.
Yeah. Cobra's driving the white van.
They got a new vehicle.
The Hiss van.
Oh no.
Anyway, so yeah,
honestly,
what do you think about this Bumblebee one? Huh?
It's hilarious because he has weather control.
Right. And
he also like walks away with them like not hand in hand, but he's got his like hands on their backs and they're like walking down the street together.
Right, presumably back to the kid's house.
Yeah.
Like, was he spying on them? Because he just picks up in the middle of the conversation.
Yeah.
Just drives up.
Like, I have written down the funniest, like, loudest line in each of these. And of course, this one is, my parents are mean.
Yeah, the line deliveries in these are just hilarious.
Yeah.
And then the Bumblebee.
Bumblebee.
Wow.
If you think about it, there is an argument to be made about, like, well, Bumblebee just does not question that this is the kid's fault.
Yeah.
He doesn't
That
consider,
is
like,
another
what
thing.
if they're actually mean?
Yeah, if this kid was like 5 or something, a little 5-year-old, oh, I didn't get my cookies, I'm gonna run away from home.
Right.
That makes sense. But this kid looks like he's at least like late middle school, early high school, something
He's got
like
the
that.
face of a 30-year-old, but...
Well, yeah, they all do in this show. In fact, my wife happened to mention that. I was showing her the PSAs while I was watching them. And she said, why do all these kids look like middle-aged people?
That's a recurring theme across most of the Transformers.
Right.
And G.I. Joe.
Yeah, it's just the art style, but yeah.
But it doesn't consider, like, well, what if the parents are actually, like, abusive in some way?
I was thinking the same thing, because, like, if this kid is this old and he's still running away from home,
it could be more serious.
It could just be teenage hormones, teenagers get real angsty about the dumbest stuff.
Yeah.
But it could actually be a serious problem.
Right.
Again,
hidden depths.
Right, hidden depths that we are plumbing.
And
speaking of teenagers causing problems, let's move on to the next one.
Don't steal cars.
Unless you have got more to say about the Bumblebee one. All right, this one stars Trax. And
I love Trax.
Yeah, these
not just as a character, but as a PSA guy.
Yeah.
Because he's supposed to be like the suave, cool, hip to the scene, like jazz-esque, but he's all about like human culture and like let's figure out what's the vibe and everything like that. You mentioned carjacking is actually a plot point in one of the season 2 episodes.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and it includes Trax. Yeah, that's one of Trax's 2 spotlight episodes is he gets carjacked by some punk-looking kids.
Yeah,
which also like we've got some 80s punks in this little PSA also. So it would have been neat if this was probably actually, I imagine, planned as either as a response to that episode or to air with the episode, because it's about carjacking and that episode is also about carjacking.
Yeah, it feels like it would be a target for teaching kids to carjack.
Right.
And then, of course, loudest line, Drax transforms and scolds them, and then he says, Drax, I figured I wouldn't get caught.
Yeah.
And he's just like, ah.
Yeah. Not freaking out that the car just turns into a robot.
Yeah.
But apparently he knows who Trax is.
And he's also like just instantly spills the beans. He could have just like tried to play it off in some way, but he was just like, I figured I wouldn't get caught.
What I find interesting about these is they always have one kid who's going to do a dumb thing and one kid who's like, I don't know about this. We shouldn't do that, because in this one he says to his friend like, hey, let's go for a ride, and the other kid's like,
nah, that's stealing.
Yeah, he's like, I'll bring it back. Yeah, anyway, so the next one is don't bike at night without reflectors.
Missed opportunity to use reflector and have a Decepticon teach.
Oh yeah, that would have been funny, but I think reflector was discontinued by this point, and that's because he doesn't show up in season 2 very much.
This has Red Alert
if at all.
This
has Red Alert, who I swear was aiming for those kids.
Yeah.
Because these 2 kids are like biking at night, and the one says, hold on, I can hardly see you, look out a car!
This doesn't sound like Red Alert's voice actor either.
Yeah.
It sounds completely different, but he's just...
He has the weirdest line delivery.
It's like are you boys okay?
It's so funny because, like, the okay is like an afterthought. It's like, are you boys okay?
Just sounds like the DK, okay.
Right, you know. It's supposed to be like an accident, but I swear he was going to take those kids down.
Red Alert honestly feels like the one that would probably give all of these PSAs because he's so paranoid about everything.
Right.
And that's what most of these are, is just like being super paranoid about a hyper-specific situation.
Right. I do like sort of the vibe of these that when the Decepticons aren't stealing things, the Autobots are just kind of vibing, and we'll see this in season 2 a little bit.
Yeah, they
that
take
the
a
Autobots just
superhero
kind of
role.
hang out, and they just happen to be passing by.
They're like detached superheroes.
Right, and they they're either on patrol or they're just hanging out.
This one don't
This
vote
one
without a
always
life
makes
jacket.
you split ribs.
Wheezing. So, Sea Spray, great character. These kids are on a boat. Why are these 12-year-olds like piloting a boat all by themselves?
Is the 80s, man.
Yeah. But it's like, you're gonna wear that sissy thing? It's called a life jacket. Yeah, well, I don't need one. And then the one's like, prepare to come about, and the sail comes just
clocks this kid, clobbers him
instantly into the water.
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
Help, I don't have a life jacket. And
this is a legitimate danger on a boat.
Exactly.
You know?
And
sailboat.
But it's just so funny that none of them warn him about this feels planned.
I feel like the other kids were trying to assassinate him.
All right, prepare to come about.
He's kind of the annoying bully kid.
We had to bring him along.
Black. He's wearing black. He's got the longer hair. He's kind of mean to the other kid.
Cool,
so maybe they brought
lifeboat.
He bullied his way onto the boat. It's probably the other two kids' parents' boat or something. He bullied his way onto the boat, and then they're like, all right, let's get rid of this guy once and for all.
This guy.
And then Sea Spray spoils their plan.
Sea Spray could in fact be in on it. They're like, hey, Sea Spray, there's a kid who doesn't wear a life jacket. And they're like, I got something.
I do think it's believable that he would be there just because he is kind of the Autobots Coast Guard.
He's one of the few sea Autobots.
Right. And he and we see in other episodes where he's he shows up as just that's his job, patrolling the ocean, you know. I mean, what else is he going to do? He turns into a boat.
Right. And then finally, it's listed as don't jump to conclusions about people. It's way more don't be sexist.
Right. Because this one is about some skateboarding kids with an interesting animation where they're the whole background is animated because they're the
weirdly high budget
following along with these skateboarding kids, and then this girl in this most boy doing girl voice says, "Hey, can I join you?"
And then loud line. Nah, you're just a girl.
You're just a girl. Every cartoon about don't be sexist ever.
My favorite thing about all of these is the amount of nah.
Nah energy in these. Yes. And then Powerglide, who turns into a jet, just comes out of the sky and lands on his tail, and then turns into
astronaut style.
Yeah. Just lands in the skate park and then transforms and says basically, don't be mean because she's a girl. Wait until you see what she can do.
See, it's not even
and then be mean.
That's my thing. It's it's not even don't discount her just because she's a girl.
Yeah.
It's don't discount her. Wait until she proves how cool she is.
Right. She could still be a loser.
Yeah.
But don't assume that she's a loser because she's a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I feel like more like most boys, skateboarding boys would be like, yeah, come on, girl, let's go.
Let's go.
But
do some sick flips.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting that Powerglide defends the girls because in a later episode of season 2, he has a human girlfriend.
You would, Powerglide. You would.
and then also it's possibly implied that Moonracer is kind of his girlfriend.
Maybe
that other episode.
He dips in both pools.
Right. He's got he's trying to date two women at once. He figures just because they're on two different planets and he hasn't seen one in 4 million years that it'll be all right.
Howard Lad's really into long distance relationships.
I guess so. And yeah. Anyway, we're gonna leave that there.
We're gonna leave that steaming pile right there.
So the PSAs, where can you watch them now?
They're on YouTube.
They're on YouTube. I'm sure there's more legal ways to watch them on the DVDs.
Oddly enough,
the PlayStation 2 game.
the most bizarre thing on the planet. I found them uploaded by Crunchyroll of Australia.
That's where I watched them too.
It's like, why? Why do they, out of all of the... Anyway, it's wild.
Anyway. So moving on, let's run through our segments real quick to kind of wrap this up.
Lightning round.
Yeah, best quotes and weird robot lingo from Plague of Insecticons. You and your shortcuts, Sunstreaker.
Most brother energy possible.
Yeah. And then Braun just dissing on Rumble. Look at the bright side. At least they didn't bring that sawed-off nerd Rumble along.
Sawed off implying he's a full Transformer and they just sawed him in half to where he's just this little runt.
And then, of course, I gotta throw in kickbacks. You old Autobot booby!
Yeah, we both put down...
yeah, go ahead.
Wheeljack, after getting knocked out of the sky and caught on Optimus's trailer, he's like, "Thanks, Prime. Keep on trucking." Feels very PSA.
And then Bombshell saying, "It's that crazy jet again." At least I think it's Bombshell.
Maybe.
It might be the other one. It could be any of them, except for Shrapnel.
Yeah. We're swimming in a potential...
And then I love the turnaround of, "Careful, we're swimming in a potential inferno," and then Thundercracker lights the inferno.
Immediately lights it.
And then Megatron,
Helium-headed.
"What is that helium-headed grasshopper talking about?" And then Shrapnel and Wheeljack just, "Taste the lightning, Autobots! It tastes terrible."
It tastes terrible.
Pretty good. And then from Heavy Metal War.
There's like, "There's nobody driving them." And he says, "Right, no one drives us, stupid humans." In like a kind of New York accent.
Right.
Starscream criticizing Megatron's plan. And he said, "We failed before due to no fault of mine." Megatron in total denial.
Yeah. I want your opinion on this one. It sounds like when Wheeljack comes out and says, "Let's see how he likes my new shock blast cannon," and then it blows up in his face and says, "That's a shock, all right." And then Ironhide says, it sounds like he says, "Too much lint, not enough action."
Makes sense if he's talking about like a shock, like a static electricity shock.
Oh, okay.
But why lint and not enough action, implying that lint is not action-packed?
Megatron saying, "You have such a strong sense of honor."
Honor.
like it's he's just so snide.
Yeah.
You know. And then we already covered this one. "You all must contribute power chip rectifiers, but I need my power chip rectifier."
But I need that. Bulkhead, I needed that.
And then when Megatron snaps at Starscream for pointing out the rules, Starscream replies with, "I was only raising a legal point."
That's Starscream talking about Skyfire and the whole legal debacle.
And then again, Starscream has a lot of good ones.
He does.
He says, "Reflector and Thundercracker must be proud, or rather their power chip rectifiers must be."
All right, you freaking nerd.
And then
pushes up glasses and it's like he's using his special technique.
And then of course Grimlock saying, "No, destroy Teletran 1, Dinobots destroy you." And Snarl just coming out with Sludge says, "I've not seen these Decepticons before," and Snarl just shoots with his sword and says, "And not see them again because we dynamite them to pieces."
Dynamite. Definitely spelled with an I instead of a Y.
Right, exactly. And then Hook saying, "It's bad news, Scrapper. They brought the heavy artillery." And then Optimus just saying, "It is ended," as the smoke of his his charred enemies rises.
Now, who can say in this vast universe is anything really forever?
I love that.
And Megatron's "We shall rise again."
Of course.
Great stuff.
So who was your favorite character? Moving on to the next segment. Favorite characters in this batch of episodes?
Honestly, Shrapnel, honestly.
I do really like Shrapnel.
He's got such a big focus, and then he kind of fades into the background a little bit in
the season
future
2.
episodes.
Yeah. He's pretty cool.
Good highlight on him.
I kind of want to say Megatron for his role in. Even though his plan has holes in it, I do just think that
he has a plan.
It's a really good Heavy Metal Wars.
He's very shrewd in that episode.
Yeah. Other than him, I'd probably say Shrapnel.
Yeah.
So, magic hand tech. Magic slidey hand tech.
We get a great one. Shrapnel.
yeah, the Insecta shells.
He just pulls back his hand and then shoots a bunch of shrapnel.
Yep. Proton-powered Pathfinder is mentioned. There's also the repulsor field.
Wind chargers.
Yep. Kickback, I mentioned briefly. He's got his gun just appear out of subspace. Ironhide gets to use his liquid nitrogen on the flaming tanker.
Right.
And then in Heavy Metal War, Ironhide has his chest sensor, Spidey Sense thing going on again, where from SOS Dinobots. Cliffjumper uses glass gas again from... I
don't know if he's ever used it,
He used it to get into the Decepticon base in the Ultimate Doom Part 1. And then the power chip rectifier is a big one.
It's just kind of introducing like a new piece of biology.
Yeah, it explains where they get that. And then the crazy lightning hand. that is used several times.
Yeah. Errors. Animation errors.
Next segment. Yeah.
Kickback's face is so prominent.
Sometimes he just has it when he's in his bug mode.
Sometimes they cover like what would be his face with just red.
Yeah.
So that it looks like a mouth.
Because it's supposed to turn into the mouth part of the insect.
But sometimes it's just like his fully detailed face there.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I was unintentionally wheezing at the fact that when all the Autobots pull up and transform, Ironhide transforms from robot mode into vehicle mode, and everyone transforms the other way. So it's just really funny to me that he just... it's all backwards. He's just like, oh, shoot, sorry.
Which episode is that in?
It's in Heavy Metal War.
Oh, okay. One of the Constructicons calls another one Scrounge, I guess. When they're under the volcano, he's like, "Careful, Scrounge! This volcano is still active."
Yeah.
Or at least that's what it sounds like. And then when Chip and Wheeljack are analyzing the battle damage to Optimus, we get Teletran 1 displays all of the Decepticons because it's detected their powers being used. And on the display, the things are spelt weird. There is a note on the, once again, TF Wiki page for this episode that goes into more detail about this, but I'm just going to read out what the text says real quick. Megatron, and then the product number, and then it says Decepticon Lighter. And then Starscream, product number, and then Silver. That's all description he gets, just silver. Thundercracker, but it shows Megatron. It says blue. Yeah, all of them have their product number. It's like some sort of toy product code or something like that. And it's from like some sort of production Bible or something. Soundwave as 2 different words.
Soundwave.
Yeah. Decepticon Comicator. All one word. Runbull. Not Rumble.
Rumble.
I don't know who Runbull is, but apparently Teletran is colorblind because it thinks that it's Red Robot L.
Rumble is purple, Frenzy is red.
In the cartoon. Yeah. But apparently Teletran...
getting confused!
Teletran thinks it's living in the Marvel the comics because it calls Runbull Red Robot L.
Reflector.
And then Reflector is Camera R. And Skywarp, as 2 words, is black. So, being onto our next segment, which won't show up very often. Yeah,
it's time.
Duel. Being that this is the last episode of the season, and generally that means a final climatic duel between Optimus and Megatron, which this episode has. We are going to have a segment called End of Season Duels, where we give a rank to the duel at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Who could have figured? We're going to judge it on 2 scales, the story scale and the spectacle scale. And the story scale is based on Autobot ranks. And the spectacle scale is Decepticon ranks. The Autobot ranks go team leader. That's the lower end. It's a 1 to 5 scale.
Okay.
The lower end to the higher end. Team leader, city commander, convoy, supreme leader, and prime.
Nice.
By the way, I got some of these ranks from Japanese media as well as
Convoy,
the American.
especially.
Yeah, convoy, city commander, and supreme leader come from some of the Japanese shows, and you'll notice some from here. All right, for the Decepticons, we've got air commander, treacherous lieutenant,
It's part of the title.
nemesis, tyrant of the firmament, and emperor of destruction.
Oh, yeah.
And you may recognize some of those from both American and Japanese cartoons.
Nice. Story scale for
Yeah.
Optimus versus Megatron.
Now, I've got to ask, do you want to talk about the duel, the officially sanctioned duel in which Megatron cheats, or Optimus shooting Megatron once and he falls in the lava?
That's not a duel.
Okay.
That's an overwhelming victory.
Yeah. It's an execution.
Yeah. Story scale, I think probably, I'd say Supreme Leader, because it's pretty good. Like, it's a good confrontation of, like, law, and there's a lot of lore going into it, and it feels like, as we've said, a culmination of Season 1.
Yes.
So, I would say, Supreme Leader, just below Prime.
I think so as well. Story-wise, yeah, it plays into the episode pretty good. It plays into the themes of Optimus and Megatron, and it plays into the themes of the supposed themes of Season 1.
Yeah.
The overarching story, like you said. So yeah, I will match you at Supreme Leader for that.
I see your Supreme Leader and match you.
Yeah. For the spectacle scale, what do you want to give it?
It's closer to, like, Nemesis, maybe Tyrant of the Firmament, if I'm getting a little bit generous with it, because it is a good fight.
Yeah.
It's not super flashy. It
I
kind
feel
of
like-
is.
Yeah,
but
it's flashy because he uses so many abilities, but it really looks like just Megatron does this and then Optimus falls over. Megatron does the, because it is really kind of a beatdown,
Yeah.
And it's
the spectacle all comes from the one shot where he shocks his hand and then grabs him and throws him over his back.
Right. And then
that one shot is really, really well done.
And then when Optimus picks up the boulder also.
Exactly.
Yeah, other than that, I feel like most of the time there's a few good, like, key poses and stuff, but, like, overall, it's kind of a slow fight. It's broken up a lot by the commentary from Starscream or Spike or somebody,
It's the spectacle, though. It is pretty. It's kind of there because of, like, I'm thinking like the earthquake and sound blasting and everything like that.
Yeah,
that is pretty spectacle. So
yeah, I think I'm going to.
I think the story elements are stronger than the spectacle.
It is, yeah. So whereas I landed on the higher end for story, I think for spectacle, I'm going to rate it a treacherous lieutenant.
I'll go Nemesis.
Okay.
Good middle of the road, because it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's just not outstanding either.
But it is a good kickoff. I feel like we have had more spectacular fights earlier in the season.
Yeah.
But story-wise, it is very thematically resonant, and it is a good kickoff to the tradition of ending the season with a duel.
Yes.
Or at least some big battle,
Yeah.
And then we also get a lot of other really spectacular fights with, like, the Dinobots and the Constructicons and Devastator and all that.
The duel itself isn't necessarily the primary focus of the episode.
Right. It's story relevance.
Just like in later shows and stuff, there's like way more spectacle.
Oh yeah. There's other fights that are going to rank way higher. I know that the movie is going to get really high on the scale, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to be giving out a Prime and Emperor of Destruction together
Yeah.
until one very specific duel in one very specific show.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a while before we get to it,
Yeah.
but I don't, as far as I know,
I don't think it's been topped since.
it was nothing compares close to it, except for, I'd say, probably the fight in the movie and the fight at the end of Victory. Except for those two, I don't think anything came close to this one I'm thinking of, and I don't think it's ever been topped since.
Yeah.
And you are going to have to listen to us for probably
A couple years.
8 years before we get to that.
Yeah.
But we will.
Who knows? We might pick up the pace.
Yeah, hopefully we'll pick up the pace. Maybe we'll eventually just start doing whole like story arcs and not do
Yeah.
individual episodes or something. But we'll see.
Depends on the pacing of the show itself.
Right.
But
And with that, I think we should probably, this episode actually ran a little longer than I expected it to, so we should probably skip our wiki pages this time.
oh, come on.
We can use them next time.
We're looking at them though, but they're pretty short.
Okay. We'll do our next segment.
Especially yours.
Okay, TF Wiki Go Button Trivia.
Let's do mine first because it's a little bit longer.
Yours.
I definitely want to end on yours.
Okay.
So mine is King. He is an unaffiliated Transformer from the Revenge of the Fallen portion of the live-action film continuity family. After crashing to Earth in 1954, the King scanned a broiler for his alternate mode and became Burger King's flame-broiling culinary engineer. This was the Burger King tie-in advertisement with the Revenge of the Fallen movie.
He actually looks pretty majestic.
He does. He has like a metal beard, which is fitting because Jetfire in that movie has like the metal beard and everything.
He looks like he'd actually fit in more with like the knights from The Last Knight.
Weirdly enough, yes.
Yeah.
And he is royalty.
And the 13 Primes
But yes,
in the Transformers Prime.
It's a live-action Transformer-styled Burger King mascot.
Yeah.
And
so funny.
Despite having a conversation tech spec rank of 0, he somehow revealed his burgering secrets to the Burger King scientist and stayed hidden on Earth for decades, waiting for the arrival of his fellow Transformers from Cybertron. It is possible that the King is the mastermind behind the barbecue double Stacticon. And I love the quote that they have is from Agent Simmons, the conspiracy theorist in that movie. Is this, Transformers, they've been here a long, long time. Yeah, so he was just a big promotional thing. Pretty well designed, honestly. One of the better looking of the Transformers from there. In some interesting notes, Burger King was established in 1954, so it is likely that the culinary technology the King shared allowed the fast food chain to get off the ground. Fun little thing, flashback to 2009, which yours is also.
Yes, mine also comes from Revenge of the Fallen somehow.
Yeah.
I clicked on the TF Wiki page, or the Go button, and I landed on the Titus shirt. This is the Titus shirt. These frat guys checked. That is the entirety of the page.
It is.
And it has a picture of the two frat boys from Revenge of the Fallen who are bullying Sam.
I argue that this is still like one of, if not the only joke that lands regardless of context in those movies.
Yeah.
It's easily one of the best.
Yeah,
like,
the
where
live
are you
action...
going? Oh, just going to check for a tighter shirt for you to wear. There isn't a tighter shirt. We checked.
That's so dumb. That movie has so many dumb things in it, but, you know, Transformers is great when it's dumb.
Yes.
Because then you can laugh at it as well as with it, and also, like...
There's a big difference between dumb and insufferable. This is on the dumb side of things.
Right. There's a lot of insufferable things in the live-action movies as well, but a lot of the dumb stuff is just so dumb it's funny.
But the tightest shirt... It does, in fact, have a wiki page.
It has a wiki page. I'm telling you, this place has everything.
It's so good.
And speaking of having everything, we should probably get back to planet Earth and real life.
I will bring up before before we move on from this, the King has tech specs fully fleshed out.
Oh my goodness.
He has a regalness of 10.
Oh.
Conversation of 0.
Oh.
Creepiness, 7.5. Heat, 10. And the others are like stealth and balance and speed and strength. And they're just kind of average.
Okay.
Well, stealth is 2 and balance is 1, so he's
He's kind of clumsy.
a little clumsy.
Maybe that's why my burger's always falling apart by the time it gets to me.
7.5 also is a very generous ranking on the creepiness scale because he is a little terrifying.
Yeah. All right.
Back to reality.
For our wrap up for this episode and season 1 as a whole, thank you so much for joining us and listening to our ramblings.
We did it.
We did it. We made it through 1 season of our show and 1 season of the Transformers show. And though we're wrapping this up, soon we will begin season 2 of our podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly how much of a break we're going to take, but I will, as with the other episodes, I will put in the description when the next episode is going to come out.
Yes. We had a good format going for the show.
I think we finally got
settled in.
Yeah.
And season 2, all the way through, all released through 1985. And we're going to end with the Japanese OVA, Scramble City.
Yes, it happens to just fit in right there.
But, yeah.
And just as Season 2 introduced new characters almost every other episode, we too plan to bring you some new characters as well. It might not be every other episode, but Season 2 of BroBots will be having some guests join us in our analysis of the show.
Bringing in the guests.
They'll pop in for an episode and then disappear as soon as their action figure is retired.
This kind of important. Up to this point, we have been viewing the Transformers episodes in a sort of chronological order that makes sense due to some of the continuity between the episodes.
Yeah, we discussed that a little bit.
Yeah. This is how they were presented in lists and on DVDs and like viewing lists and stuff. But when these episodes were first airing back in the 80s, there was a slightly different airing order. And places like the Hasbro Pulse YouTube channel, where we've been watching most of these, have them in air date order instead. So for season 1, there's like
production code order as well.
Season 1 has like a pretty clear order of events, so we stuck to what made sense. But season 2 is pretty episodic with a few major exceptions, with like character introductions and stuff. So they can be viewed in a variety of different orders without affecting the overall experience. So we've decided to follow the episode order suggested by TF Wiki, with a few exceptions.
Yeah. When planning it, it's mostly in the same order. However, there were a few episodes that I decided to shuffle around for sake of continuity.
Yeah. Pacing and...
It's mostly character... It's like, Child's Play and The Gambler are obviously supposed to be together.
Yeah. Why are they so far apart?
Yeah. And then there was an episode where the Combaticons showed up before they were created, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of changes.
Simple stuff.
Yeah. And season 3, I had to reorganize that quite a bit.
Yeah. So, with all that said, housekeeping out of the way, we hope you guys will join us again for next season, where we will start
the next season. And remember, at the time of this recording, these Transformers episodes are available on Hasbro Pulse YouTube channel, as well as on DVD and several other streaming services. So go check them out and get caught up before our next episode comes out. And
hopefully YouTube doesn't do any like weird takedowns or anything on
Well, it's
Hasbro.
The official channel. They have
I've seen some weird stuff happen.
Yeah, that's true. So we hope to see you again next season.
Indeed. Thank you. Join us again. And until then, the Transformers will return after these longer messages.
Na, 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 na.